Hi guys, tonight we travel far back in time to a world without electricity, insulation, or even a decent pair of waterproof boots. You are standing in the grey hush before sunrise somewhere in medieval Europe, your breath clouding the air like smoke from a ghostly fire. The frost bites at your fingertips even through woolen gloves, and the ground beneath your worn leather shoes is so hard it rings faintly when you walk. You can hear the low groan of wooden beams as the wind pushes against the cottage walls. This is winter as your ancestors knew it, and you, my friend, probably would not survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights and let us step into that frozen dawn together. You trudge out of your straw bed, stiff and sore. The thin blanket you shared with your family has barely kept the cold from sinking into your bones. The faint glow of embers in the hearth is the only source of light, trembling red beneath a crust of ash. You kneel, shivering, to blow on them, coaxing life from near death. The first spark of warmth feels like hope itself. The room smells of smoke and damp earth. It's a one-room dwelling, walls made from wattle and daub, patched with clay that cracks when it freezes. The air carries a sour mix of human breath, sheep's wool, and last night's porridge. Outside, snow presses heavy on the thatch. You can almost hear it sigh. In the stillness, a rooster crows somewhere in the distance, though it's too cold even for him to strut proudly. His call echoes over a landscape of white and grey, where the nearest tree has shed all signs of life. You pull on your rough spun tunic, scratchy against your skin, and fasten a belt of frayed leather. Around your legs, woolen wraps cling like icy armor. This morning, like every morning in the dead of winter, you must check on the animals before breakfast. It is not optional. They are your livelihood, and their breath alone may keep the barn from turning to stone. You step outside, and instantly, the cold strikes you like a slap. Your nose runs, and your eyelids sting. The snow crunches beneath your feet, so loud in the silence that you almost wince. Historians believe that during the harsh winters of the early 14th century, sometimes called the onset of the Little Ice Age, temperatures in parts of Europe fell dramatically. Rivers froze solid, harvests failed, and even salt for preserving food became scarce. The cold was not a passing discomfort, it was a force of nature, shaping survival itself. You walk toward the byre, where the animals are kept. Steam curls from the gaps between the wooden boards. Inside, the cows stir, their bodies warm against each other. The air is thick and rank, but compared to the outside, it feels like paradise. You pause a moment, feeling the heat from their hides seep into your hands. You whisper a soft thanks, though you don't quite know to whom, maybe to the cow, maybe to God, maybe to both. The cow's breath puffs like mist in candlelight. You begin to clear the frost from the trough and chip ice from the bucket. Your hands ache, but you work quickly. If you're too slow, the water will freeze again before the animals can drink. The rhythm of the task is strangely soothing. Lift, break, pour, breathe. A quirky detail, often forgotten, is that some farmers in the coldest regions used animal dung as insulation, plastering it on outer walls to block drafts. The smell was dreadful, but when the wind howled through the cracks, the stench felt like a small price to pay for life. You think about that as you glance at your own cottage and see patches of frozen mud still clinging to the base. Back inside, the house wakes gradually. Children cough beneath the blankets. Your spouse stirs the ashes again, blowing gently until the fire catches. You help by placing small twigs, then thicker sticks, feeding the growing flame. The first crackle echoes like laughter in the silence. Fire means warmth. Fire means coffee, though of course there is no coffee yet, only a thin broth or ale, maybe some stale bread softened with hot water. The smell of burning wood fills the air. It's smoky, but comforting. You huddle near it, palms extended, eyes half closed. This is the moment you live for every morning. the thawing of your fingers, the slow bloom of warmth across your chest. Your mind wanders to the fields beyond the village, buried under snow, waiting for spring. You know that when the thaw comes, there will be mud, sweat, and blisters, but right now, the frozen quiet feels almost holy. Historians still argue whether medieval winters were truly colder than today's, or whether people were simply less protected from them. Some say the records exaggerate, written by monks unused to labouring outdoors. Others point to ice cores and tree rings that tell of centuries when frost lingered deep into April. Whatever the truth, you can feel it now, biting at your toes through the packed earth floor. You hear the muffled thump of footsteps outside. It's your neighbour, trudging toward the well. You call out a greeting, though your voice barely rises over the wind. He grunts a reply and tips his hat. There's a quiet camaraderie in this frozen world. Everyone knows what everyone else endures. As the light strengthens, a pale sun pushes through the clouds. Its rays touch the snow, turning it to silver, but give off no warmth. You step outside again, squinting. Somewhere beyond the woods, a church bell tolls a low, resonant sound carried over the fields. It's time for morning prayers. You cross yourself out of habit, not piety, then turn back inside. For a moment you stand in the doorway and look at your small world. The hearth's glow, the steaming bucket, your family huddled close. This is survival, not heroic, not dramatic, just stubborn, everyday endurance. You breathe out, and the air crystallizes. You smile faintly. The day will be long, but the fire is burning, and that's enough for now. The first breath of the hearth fills the air, thin ribbons of smoke curling like sleepy ghosts against the thatch roof. You lean close, feeling the sting of the heat against your cheeks as the flames finally take hold. The logs pop softly, releasing a scent of resin and damp bark. The warmth creeps outward, slow and uncertain at first, like a hesitant guest, but soon the room begins to breathe again. Your hands, cracked and raw from the morning's chores, hover near the glow. The light shimmers over rough walls and the soot-darkened ceiling beams. In the dimness, it feels like the entire cottage is waking from its own cold dream. The hearth is not just a place for cooking or light. It is the heart of your home. Without it, the night is unbearable. Firewood is precious. Every stick comes from days of labor in the forest, cutting, splitting, and hauling. You remember how, before the first snows, the village gathered in small bands to collect enough wood to last until spring. Some carried it by sled, others by cart if they were lucky enough to own one. The work was heavy, but the fear of running out was heavier. You can still hear old Marjorie, the widow at the edge of the village, warning that a house without wood is a coffin waiting for its tenant. You reach for the iron poker, stirring the coals, watching sparks dance up the chimney. The chimney itself is a crude thing, not much more than an open hole with a bit of clay funneling the smoke. Sometimes it clogs with soot or damp straw. Sometimes it spits sparks back at you, and you spend the next few minutes stamping out small fires on the floor. Still, it works well enough to keep the room from choking on smoke. Historians tell us that many medieval homes had no chimney at all. Smoke would simply rise through a hole in the roof or drift into the rafters until it seeped out through the cracks. The soot blackened the walls, preserved the wood from insects, and dyed the inside of your lungs with every breath. There was a strange beauty in that your home literally marked by every fire you ever lit. You sit close to the flame, eyes watering, letting the heat soak through your clothes. Around you, life stirs. Your spouse kneels beside you, feeding small sticks into the blaze with a rhythm that feels almost musical. A child sneezes from the corner, nose pink and dripping. A cat stretches by the hearth, purring in a tone that vibrates like contentment itself. The smell of porridge begins to blend with the smoke. A clay pot sits near the coals, filled with oats and water from last night's well trip. You stir it slowly, feeling the sticky resistance. It's not a feast, but it will fill you, and that's all that matters in winter. You sprinkle a pinch of salt, a treasure in itself, and the taste sharpens, earthy and alive. A curious fact from old household accounts mentions that peasants sometimes mixed ashes into their porridge when salt ran out. It sounds dreadful, but the alkaline from wood ash could actually help replace minerals lost through poor diets. You imagine it crunching faintly between your teeth, and you're grateful your supply hasn't yet run dry. Outside, the wind sighs against the shutter. You can hear it pushing, whining through the gaps, desperate to sneak in. You stuff more straw along the edges of the window frame to block the draft. The straw rustles like dry whispers. Every small act feels like defiance. You will not let the cold claim this space. There's a strange rhythm to your days now. Wake before dawn, tend to the fire, feed the animals, eat what little you have, and keep moving. If you sit still too long, the chill creeps in like a thief. Yet, there's comfort in the repetition. The fire is constant, dependable in a world that rarely is. You glance at the iron tools near the wall, the tongs, the poker, the little hook used to hang pots at different heights above the flame. Each has its place. Each has been held by your parents, and maybe theirs too. The metal is pitted, but strong. You polish it now and then with fat from the cooking pot, watching the dull shine emerge. Historians still argue whether medieval hearths were truly central in every peasant's life, or if they've become romantic symbols for modern imagination. Some records suggest that people often spent time in communal bakeries or lordly kitchens instead, where warmth was abundant and gossip plentiful. Yet the truth may be somewhere in between your home fire as private solace, the public hearth as shared life. The flame shifts again, brighter now. It throws long shadows across the floorboards, and for a moment you imagine stories in them. The dancing shapes remind you of the old tales told on long winter nights of spirits that hid in the firelight, of ancestors watching from the smoke. You remember the village priest warning that such thoughts invite demons, but deep down you think he's wrong. There's something good in the way the fire speaks. It has always been your companion, never your enemy. You reach for a cup of ale left from last night. It's gone flat and a little sour, but it warms your stomach. You hold it near the fire until it steams slightly, then sip. The warmth spreads slowly, like courage you didn't know you had. Your youngest child stirs awake and crawls to your lap, nestling close. You feel the soft weight against your chest. The heartbeat small but steady. You pull the blanket tighter around both of you. The fire hums. The wind groans outside. Life goes on. A log collapses inward with a shower of sparks. You lean forward to adjust it, feeling the dry heat sting your eyes again. Through the haze, you can see a faint shimmer where the air ripples above the coals. For just a moment, you think of summer, the smell of cut grass, the feel of sun on your face, but the vision fades, replaced by the present warmth that you've fought so hard to create. You whisper to yourself, half a prayer, half a promise. Keep the fire alive. That is all that matters now. The world outside can freeze, but in here, as long as this glow remains, you are still alive. Morning ripens slowly into a pale and icy light. The fire is holding steady, its warmth reaching only a few steps from the hearth before the air turns cruel again. You pull on another layer, the thickest wool you own, and feel the coarse fibers rasp against your neck. The smell of sheep still clings to it, an earthy perfume of lanolin and survival. Every garment you wear carries a story. The tunic was woven last spring on a simple loom, its threads uneven but sturdy. The underlayer is a rough linen shirt, patched so many times that the stitches form their own map of hardship. Around your shoulders rests a cloak lined with bits of fur rabbit, maybe fox stitched together by hands that knew necessity better than luxury. It is heavy, but that weight feels like safety. Clothing in these months is not about beauty. It is about staying alive. You recall how your mother used to say that a farmer's best armor is not a sword, but good wool. She was right. When the wind cuts through the valley, your clothes are the only thing standing between you and the frozen fields. Records from manorial inventories tell us that wool was the lifeblood of the medieval economy. It clothed peasants, lined merchant purses, and filled the treasuries of kings. For ordinary folk like you, it was both comfort and currency. A well-spun cloak could be traded for food, rent, or even safety during hard times. Wool was wealth you could wear. As you tighten the belt around your waist, you glance at your spouse spinning fibers near the fire. The spindle twirls with hypnotic rhythm, and the thin strand of yarn seems impossibly fragile. You know how much patience it takes to spin enough for a single tunic. The wool must be washed, carded, teased, and twisted, each step taking hours. The process is endless, yet strangely soothing. There is a curious custom from certain northern villages where newlywed couples were gifted a skein of unspun wool instead of money. It symbolized shared labor. If they could spin and weave it together before winter's end, they would never go cold. You smile faintly, wondering if love really can be measured in thread. Your boots are another story. The leather is cracked from frost, patched with scraps of hide. Inside, you stuff straw for insulation, changing it every few days before it molds. Some villagers grease their shoes with animal fat to repel water, though it leaves a smell that clings for days. You decide not to complain. The smell means warmth, and warmth is life. According to old guild records, furriers ranked among the most respected tradesmen of the Middle Ages. They worked with everything from squirrel and beaver to marten and bear, creating garments so prized that laws were passed to control who could wear what. The rich wrapped themselves in ermine and sable, the poor in whatever they could trap or trade. Yet even the humblest fur-trimmed cloak could mean the difference between comfort and frostbite. You pull your hood low as a gust slips through the cracks in the wall. The wind moans like a voice searching for entry. You shove a rag into the gap and turn back to the hearth. Your fingers tremble slightly from the chill. The fire hisses when you add a damp log. For a moment, smoke fills the air, making you cough. Then the flame catches, licking upward in renewed life. Outside, the sound of distant laughter reaches you. Two boys from the village are sliding across a frozen pond, their shouts sharp in the still air. You remember being that age, when cold meant adventure, not danger. The ice gleamed then too, smooth as glass, and the thrill of gliding over it made you forget your numb toes. You smile, then frown. You also remember the year Thomas fell through the ice. They pulled him out too late. You still avoid that pond in early winter. Academic opinion is divided on how well medieval villagers prepared for such hazards. Some accounts describe a surprising level of practical knowledge, testing ice thickness, building simple footbridges, using straw shoes to walk on snowdrifts, while others insist that most relied on instinct and superstition. You suppose both are true. Survival was part knowledge, part luck, and a little faith. You reach for a wool cap hanging from a peg. The inside is lined with scraps of linen. You pull it over your ears, adjusting it until the edges meet your cheeks. The warmth is instant, a gentle cocoon against the endless cold. It smells faintly of smoke and sheep, which somehow feels comforting. There is an old superstition whispered among shepherds. If your hat burns in the fire accidentally, you must replace it before sunset or risk losing your flock. It sounds absurd, yet you still wouldn't test it. The line between habit and belief blurs easily when winter lasts this long. Your spouse finishes spinning and winds the thread onto a small wooden reel. It gleams pale gold in the firelight. She hums softly, a tune older than words. The sound is thin, almost fragile, but it warms you more than the fire. You glance at your children bundled under blankets. Their small hands poke out, searching for warmth. You tuck the edges tighter around them, feeling the rough fabric beneath your fingers. It's not soft, not fine, but it's enough. Everything in this life is about enough. You think of travelers who come through the village, pilgrims, soldiers, merchants wrapped in layers you can barely imagine. Some carry cloaks lined with foxtails, others wear hoods dyed bright with imported woad. To you, they look like creatures from another world, but even they, with all their wealth, shiver under the same winter sky. No matter how rich or poor, everyone kneels before the same fire in the end. Wool, fur, linen, straw, they are the great equalizers of the season. They whisper a single truth. Comfort is fleeting, but warmth shared is warmth multiplied. You lean closer to the fire and close your eyes for a moment, letting the sounds fade, the crackle of burning wood, the faint hum of spinning, the soft breaths of your family. You picture all the generations who did this same thing, wearing the same wool, praying for the same thaw, and you realize with a small shiver that survival is not a single act. It is a long, continuous thread, spun from patience, persistence, and a little bit of hope. The cottage walls stand like quiet sentinels against the wind. Their surface is rough, uneven, and patched with clumps of frozen clay. You reach out to touch one, feeling the chill seep into your palm. The wall feels alive, as if it breathes with the rhythm of the storm outside. You trace the lines where straw peeks through the daub, each piece a reminder of the hands that built it long ago. Your home is small, but it holds everything that matters. The thatched roof above you creaks under the weight of snow. From time to time, flakes drift through tiny gaps, settling on the floor like white dust. You sweep them aside with a bundle of twigs tied together. The scent of damp straw fills your nose, earthy and familiar. Records from medieval manorial rolls mention that most peasants lived in houses built from the land itself. Wattle walls woven from sticks, coated with mud and straw, set upon a base of stone. The floors were compacted earth, sometimes covered in rushes or reeds. The design was simple but clever. Thick walls kept the heat in, while the roof's steep pitch let rain and snow slide away. You look up at the beams above your head, blackened with soot and smoke. They have seen decades of winters, maybe centuries. The wood smells faintly of tar and old fires. A bundle of dried herbs hangs from one beam, their scent faint but comforting. Your grandmother swore that rosemary kept away illness, though no one knows why. You keep it there anyway, just in case. A curious note found in a medieval household guide suggests that peasants sometimes smeared pig fat along the inside of their walls to make them more water resistant. You wonder if that could really work. The idea seems half absurd, half brilliant. You picture yourself standing on a stool, spreading lard with a wooden spoon while the children laugh. Perhaps warmth makes fools of everyone. The roof above groans again. You know it must be checked soon. If the snow builds too heavy, the beams might give way. You pull on your cloak and step outside, greeted immediately by a sting of cold air, so sharp it feels like knives against your skin. The light is dazzling. The sun glints off the snow, turning the world to silver. You blink and squint as you move around the cottage. From here, you can see the structure clearly. The thick stone base, the thatch bound tight with rope, the uneven chimney puffing a thin column of smoke. Despite its crooked lines and worn timbers, it stands proud against the endless white. It looks small but brave, like a creature huddled for warmth. Archaeological excavations of rural English villages show that homes like yours often had double layers of thatch for insulation. The outer layer could be stripped and replaced every few years, while the inner layer remained untouched for decades. Inside, the thatch trapped warm air and muffled sound. Even so, in deep winter, frost sometimes formed on the underside of the roof. You can imagine waking to find delicate ice crystals above your head, glittering in the faint dawn light. You shovel snow from around the base of the walls, your breath puffing in the air. The sound of the shovel scraping against frozen earth breaks the silence. A magpie calls somewhere in the distance. The village beyond your field is quiet. Even the dogs are sleeping. You pause for a moment and let the stillness wrap around you. When you step back inside, the change feels immediate. The air is heavy with warmth and smoke again. Your hands burn slightly as they thaw. You rub them together, grateful for the walls that hold this fragile heat. Every crack, every patch of mud, every timber beam has its purpose. According to some preserved estate accounts, landlords occasionally ordered peasants to rebuild their homes every generation or two, believing that constant repair prevented fire and rot. Others allowed families to patch and mend indefinitely, creating houses that evolved over centuries. Scholars remain uncertain how much of this was practicality and how much was control. But whatever the reason, you can feel the truth in your bones. A home is never finished, only maintained. You glance toward the small window set in the wall. It is made from stretched animal bladder rather than glass, translucent but not clear. Light seeps through like diluted honey. You can see the shadow of a tree outside, its bare branches trembling in the wind. The window hums faintly as the gusts push against it. You stuff a wad of wool into the corner to stop the draft. A peculiar practice mentioned in monastic letters describes how some villagers would line their walls with tapestries or woven mats to trap heat. The rich might hang embroidered cloths depicting saints or hunts, while the poor used old sacks or animal hides. You think of that idea and glance at the old cloak hanging by the door. Maybe tomorrow you'll nail it up behind your bed. It might make a difference. As evening creeps closer, shadows climb the walls. The light of the hearth flickers across the surfaces, turning every crack into a landscape. The smoke drifts upward, caught in the rafters before sneaking out through the chimney hole. You sit close to the wall and listen to the faint whistling of the wind outside. It feels as if the entire building sighs along with you. You reach for a mug of ale, the warmth spreading through your fingers. The walls hold the sound of every breath, every whisper. They are more than shelter. They are memory. Generations have lived within them, laughed, mourned, and waited out the cold. Some chroniclers of the time describe the homes of common folk as miserable huts unfit for humans. But they were wrong in their own way. Yes, the smoke burns your eyes, and the cold creeps in no matter what you do. Yet inside these four walls there is life, laughter, and a stubborn kind of comfort. The cottage does not promise luxury, it promises endurance. You sit quietly, feeling the heartbeat of your home pulsing in the warmth of the hearth and the creak of the beams. Outside, the night gathers strength again, black and endless. Inside, your small light continues to glow, wrapped safely in walls of clay, straw, and faith. The night deepens, and the cold presses closer. Every sound outside feels sharper, every gust of wind like a whisper at the door. You huddle by the hearth, wrapped in your cloak, listening to the rhythm of your own breath. The fire sighs softly, its orange light licking the walls. In this dim glow, the cottage feels smaller, but strangely more alive. Your family gathers close. The children, still drowsy from the day, sit near the hearthstones, their faces glowing in the flicker of firelight. A pot simmers gently, filling the air with the scent of barley and onion. It is not a feast, but its warmth is a blessing. You pass wooden bowls around, and everyone eats in silence, content to have something hot in their stomachs. After the meal, you look toward the animals' corner of the cottage. Yes, they are inside too. The old cow lies quietly, her breath forming faint clouds in the air. The chickens roost along a beam, their feathers puffed and still. A pair of pigs grunt softly in their straw pen, half dreaming. It might seem strange to a modern visitor, but here the animals share your roof, your air, your heat. Contemporary manorial records and church documents confirm that in much of medieval Europe, peasants and livestock lived under the same roof during the coldest months. The animal's body heat could raise the temperature of a room by several degrees. It was practical, if not pleasant. The smell was thick, but so was survival. You can feel the warmth radiating from the cow's body even across the room. The floor beneath her is covered in straw, which soaks up both heat and filth. Every few days, you add a new layer on top, creating what some villagers call a living floor. It smells earthy and sweet, like hay and life itself. A peculiar habit from Scandinavian villages involved letting sheep sleep at the foot of the family bed. The lanolin in their wool released a faint, oily warmth, and the animals were gentle enough not to disturb the sleepers. You imagine that arrangement and chuckle quietly. Perhaps necessity breeds the oddest forms of comfort. The air is close now, heavy with breath and steam. You open the door a crack to let the smoke drift out. The wind rushes in, biting your face. For a second, you see your own reflection in the night sky. A flicker of movement, a silhouette framed by snow. You close the door again, sealing the warmth inside. According to parish tax rolls from the 13th century, families were often fined for allowing animals to wander outside at night, not because it was cruel, but because predators roamed freely. Wolves were real, not fairy tales. Their howls echoed across fields and through forests. The stories told by firelight of beasts at the door, of spirits in the shape of dogs, came from memory, not imagination. You settle back beside the fire, glancing at your sleeping children. Their heads rest close together, and you smile faintly at the sight. The floor creaks as the cow shifts her weight. The rhythm of breathing fills the room. Human, animal, and flame, all in harmony. There is a faint sweetness in this closeness. You can hear the pig snoring softly, a deep rumble that somehow feels reassuring. The chickens stir, feathers rustling, then settle again. The room hums with the sound of shared life. You think of it as a single heartbeat, keeping time through the night. Some surviving letters from medieval monks speak of this mingling of man and beast as both practical and symbolic. The monastery walls were cold stone, yet even the brothers kept cats for warmth and companionship. The same logic holds here. Heat is precious, and no source of it is refused. No consensus exists among modern historians about how widespread this custom truly was. Some argue that only the poorest peasants shared quarters with livestock, while others claim it was nearly universal during harsh winters. You do not need a debate to tell you the truth. You can feel it in the air, in the quiet exhale of your cow as she dreams beside you. Your spouse adds more straw to the animal's pen, humming softly. The melody is simple, repeating, like a lullaby older than memory. It blends with the crackle of the fire and the faint rustle of feathers. The rhythm becomes hypnotic, and your eyelids grow heavy. You think briefly of the upper classes in their manners, sleeping on feather mattresses behind heavy curtains. You wonder if they ever feel the same kind of warmth, the shared pulse of life that fills a peasant's home. Perhaps their beds are softer, but their nights are lonelier. You reach for your blanket and spread it over your legs. The wool is coarse but warm. You can feel the heat rising slowly from the animal's corner, filling the room like invisible breath. It mingles with the smoke and the faint sweetness of hay. The cottage becomes its own small world, sealed against the frozen dark. An odd local saying comes to mind. The cow is the second fire. You smile to yourself, thinking how true it is. The beast gives milk, warmth, and companionship. She is part of the family, a quiet guardian against the cold. You whisper a small thanks before closing your eyes again. The fire crackles softly, echoing in the stillness. The walls hum with life. Outside, the snow continues to fall, covering the earth in silence. Inside, you drift towards sleep, surrounded by the rhythm of breath and the gentle sound of animals dreaming beside you. In this small space, packed with warmth and noise, you find the strange comfort that only winter can bring. Survival is not about solitude. It is about company, the kind that breathes, snores and rustles softly in the night. Dawn slides across the roof like a pale hand. You open your eyes slowly, feeling the stiffness in your limbs before the chill even reaches you. The fire has died to faint red embers, and the air inside the cottage feels heavy, damp, and still. You sit up, pulling the blanket close, and see your breath drift into the grey light. The animals are quiet. The cow blinks sleepily. Somewhere behind her, a chicken lets out a small indignant cluck. Your stomach grumbles before you even stand. Hunger, that constant companion, is a sharper reminder of winter than the cold itself. You make your way toward the pot by the hearth, lifting the wooden lid. The porridge left from last night has stiffened, a pale lump that smells faintly sour. You scrape it into a bowl, add a splash of water, and set it near the embers to soften again. It is not delicious, but it will keep you standing. Diet in winter is an exercise in endurance. Records from medieval household accounts show that many families relied on a rotation of preserved grains, salted meats, dried beans, and turnips buried in cellars. The bounty of summer feels like a dream now, replaced by the slow scraping of barrels and the careful rationing of every crumb. You pull out a small loaf of bread, dark and dense, baked days ago in the communal oven. It is hard enough to knock against the table with a dull thud. You smile wryly and dip it in the warm porridge, letting the steam soften it. The first bite is bland but comforting. The second feels like strength. According to estate documents from northern France, poorer peasants sometimes baked bread mixed with ground acorns or pea flour when grain ran low. The result was bitter, but it kept hunger at bay. You remember the taste from a few years back, when the harvest failed and even barley was scarce. It stuck to your teeth and left your tongue numb, but it filled your belly, and that was all that mattered. The children wake slowly, drawn by the smell of food. Their hair is wild, and their cheeks are pink from the cold. You serve them each a bowl, making sure they get the better pieces. You and your spouse eat last, as always. Family comes first, even in hunger, especially in hunger. A peculiar entry from a monastery ledger mentions that monks sometimes seasoned porridge with a few drops of honey or beer for extra warmth. You tried that once, mixing a bit of ale into the pot. The result was thick, foamy, and strangely pleasant. You think of doing it again tonight, if there is any ale left. The talk around the table is quiet. Words feel like effort. You can hear the faint creak of the walls, the soft rumble of the cow, the whistle of the wind finding its way through the cracks. Every sound reminds you that the cold is patient. It waits for mistakes. Your spouse rises first, wrapping a scarf around their shoulders. They go to check the root cellar beneath the floorboards, lifting the wooden hatch with a grunt. A wave of cold air rushes out, sharp and earthy. You peer down into the dark and see the outlines of turnips, carrots, and a few onions. Some have begun to shrivel, but most are still firm. You both breathe a sigh of relief. According to surviving letters from rural bailiffs, root cellars were vital lifelines through winter. Dug deep into the ground, they kept vegetables cool enough to prevent rot, yet warm enough to avoid freezing. The practice was so essential that some lords required peasants to maintain them as part of their rent obligations. You hand up a few turnips and onions, brushing dirt from their skins. The smell of soil clings to your hands. You toss them into a pot, add water, and place it above the fire. The crackle of flame begins again, faint but promising. Soon the scent of stew fills the room, rich and humble. Academic discussions continue about how medieval people balanced their diets during long winters. Some suggest that malnutrition was common and constant, while others argue that stored foods and careful planning allowed many villages to endure surprisingly well. You suspect the truth lies somewhere between those ideas. You have known winters of plenty and winters of near-empty cupboards. Luck and weather decide which one you get. While the stew simmers, you slice a small strip of salted pork and drop it in. It hisses as it meets the water. The fat rises in thin circles across the surface. The smell is heavenly. You stir it slowly, watching the steam curl into the rafters. One traveller's diary from the 13th century mentions a strange custom among farmers in cold regions, saving the first spoonful of every pot for the spirits of the house. The offering, placed on a shelf near the fire, was said to keep hunger from worsening. You think about that as you ladle a little broth into a small bowl and set it aside. Not because you believe it, perhaps, but because some traditions feel too old to ignore. When the stew is ready, everyone eats again. The warmth spreads through your chest, soft and heavy. You can feel life returning to your limbs. The children laugh for the first time in days, wiping broth from their chins. You smile and close your eyes for a moment, savoring the rare comfort. Outside, snow continues to fall. You can hear it pattering softly on the thatch, a sound like gentle applause. You look at your family, the animals, the flickering fire, and the small pot that smells of salt and earth. In this moment, the cold feels far away. You realize something as you watch your children scrape their bowls clean. Survival is not about abundance, it is about rhythm. You eat, you rest, you gather strength for one more day. Each meal is a quiet victory against the winter that never seems to end. You set your bowl down and stretch, joints cracking softly. Your stomach is full, the fire is steady, and the walls still hold. The day can begin now. The cold will wait at the door, but you will face it fed and ready. That is all anyone can ask for. The day unfolds slowly, pale and quiet. Smoke drifts upward from every cottage in the village, curling like thin ribbons against the winter sky. You step outside for a moment, wrapped in your cloak, and see your breath mingle with the rising haze. The world smells faintly of wood smoke, manure, and something sweeter that lingers at the edge of the wind. Someone, somewhere, has begun brewing. You can feel the pull of it even from here, the promise of warmth that is not just from fire but from a mug, steaming and fragrant, held between your hands. Back inside, you sit by the hearth again, listening to the rhythmic pop of the flames. Beside you rests a small wooden cask, half filled with ale. The liquid glows amber in the light, its surface trembling with each movement of the fire. According to surviving tavern accounts and household inventories, ale was not a luxury in medieval life, but a daily necessity. Water was often unsafe to drink, especially in winter when wells froze or became stagnant. Ale provided both hydration and calories, a mild nourishment for body and spirit. Even children drank it, though theirs was weaker and sweeter. You lift your mug and take a sip. The taste is earthy and full, with a hint of grain and smoke. It slides down your throat like a small miracle. The warmth spreads slowly, a quiet bloom that softens your shoulders and loosens your breath. You close your eyes for a moment and let the sensation sink in. A curious entry in an old brewer's ledger mentions that some villagers added roasted apples or honey to their ale during winter. The sweetness was said to chase away melancholy. You think about trying it, imagining the aroma filling the cottage. Maybe tonight, when the work is done. Your spouse busies themselves beside you, checking a small jug of mead kept near the hearth. The liquid inside gleams golden and thick. Mead is rarer than ale, too costly to make often, since honey is precious. Yet every now and then, someone in the village trades a bit of wax or cloth for a taste. On feast days, the mead flows, and even the coldest souls forget their worries for a while. Accounts from medieval festivals describe the role of drink in community life. Alehouses were not simply places to get drunk. They were gathering halls, news centres, and sanctuaries from the weather. A warm mug in hand, surrounded by laughter and song, could make even a starving winter feel survivable. You remember last year's Feast of Candlemas. The Lord allowed free ale for the day, and the entire village crowded into the manor's courtyard. People danced in boots caked with snow. The music was rough but lively, and for a few hours, everyone forgot how bitter the wind felt. You think of that now and smile faintly, the memory glowing like a coal. Some historians continue to discuss how heavy drinking truly was among peasants. Certain records warn of moral decay, of farmers too fond of the brewer's barrel. Others point out that ale was weak and plentiful, more a food than a vice. You shrug at the thought. A little warmth in a mug harms no one when frost grips the world. The fire crackles, sending sparks upward. You add another log and watch the light deepen. The children are playing quietly in the corner, their laughter echoing softly. You pour them each a cup of warm water mixed with a little ale, just enough to warm their bellies. They grin at the indulgence. A story once told by traveling monks describes a peasant who survived an entire winter drinking nothing but weak ale and eating dried peas. It sounds exaggerated, yet you believe there might be truth in it. Ale holds more strength than it seems. You remember feeling revived after a few sips during last year's hardest frost, when your hands were too stiff to move. The air inside the cottage has changed. The scent of molten yeast has replaced the smoke for a moment. It feels alive, soft, and rich. You stir the small pot near the fire where you have been warming a mix of herbs in ale, an old remedy against coughs. The smell of rosemary and sage fills the air. Scholars often note how intertwined medicine and drink were in the Middle Ages. Ales infused with herbs or honey acted as both tonic and comfort. You do not think of it as science, only as habit. When you drink it, your chest feels looser, and the night seems kinder. That is reason enough. Outside, the snow thickens again. You can hear it tapping softly on the shutters. The world shrinks to the size of your cottage. Within this small space, the warmth of the fire and the ale hold everything together. The children are whispering stories. Your spouse hums under their breath, and you sip slowly, savoring every swallow. You know that by nightfall the ale will be gone. Tomorrow you may have to walk to the brewer's house and trade a bit of grain or wool for another jug. It will be worth the journey. In this life, warmth is bought not with gold, but with effort and a good word. You tip the mug back, draining the last of the amber liquid. The heat spreads through you one final time. Outside, the wind rises, rattling the door. You look toward the fire and smile. Let it howl. Inside your chest, the warmth burns steady. The night will come soon, long and silent, but you will face it with the taste of grain and honey still on your tongue. In this cold world, even a single cup can feel like a promise that life will carry on. The day drifts towards twilight, that soft hour when the world seems made of smoke and silence. Outside, snowflakes fall so slowly they look like feathers. The cold settles again, creeping through cracks in the wall, curling under the door. You stir the fire to life once more, watching the orange glow chase the shadows back into corners. The light dances across your hands and face, gentle but fleeting. You sit down and listen to the quiet. The sounds of the village fade at night, leaving only the faint rustle of wind and the creak of old beams. This is when thoughts turn inward, when faith, fear, and imagination mingle like smoke in the rafters. Records from parish chronicles reveal that winter pushed even the most practical souls toward prayer. Frost could turn to famine in a matter of weeks, and with it came disease and despair. Churches filled with villagers seeking comfort, their breath steaming in the cold air as they knelt on icy floors. Faith was not luxury. It was the only fire left when every candle burned low. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and trace the small wooden cross hanging by the hearth. It has been there since your parents' time. The edges are worn smooth by hands and years of hope. You touch it lightly and whisper a short prayer, not grand or formal, just words of gratitude that the roof still stands and your family still breathes. Yet not all prayers belong to the church. Outside the walls of Scripture lived 1,000 older beliefs. In the hush of midwinter, when nights stretched endlessly, people remembered older names and older powers. You recall your grandmother tossing a handful of salt into the fire to keep away frost spirits. She said the sparks that flew were their angry eyes. A curious detail preserved in a monk's marginal notes describes how villagers in remote parts of Germany once carved crosses into the frost on windows, believing it kept demons from entering the house. Others hung garlands of evergreen branches to remind the spirits of spring's return. You smile faintly, thinking how faith and superstition often sit together like siblings at the same table. You step outside for a moment. The snow crunches beneath your feet, and your breath blooms white against the night. The church bell tolls once, a low sound carried by the wind. Its echo rolls across the fields, reminding every living soul that they are part of something larger. You cross yourself and look up at the stars, cold and endless above you. Somewhere behind them, you imagine warmth and mercy waiting, According to letters from wandering friars, coldest winters often brought new waves of devotion. People walked miles through blizzards to attend midnight mass, candles flickering in the wind like small suns. The sermons spoke of endurance, of divine testing. Sometimes the priests themselves were so frozen they could barely raise the chalice. Yet they did, and the people sang through chattering teeth. Scholars remain uncertain how much of that piety was born from faith and how much from fear. You suspect it hardly matters. Whether one prayed to God, to saints, or to the spirit of the hearth, the act itself brought warmth to the heart. Back inside, the fire pops, scattering tiny embers onto the floor. You sweep them back gently with a worn broom. The cross on the wall glows faintly in the flicker, a shadow and a symbol both. Your spouse murmurs a blessing under their breath as they stir the evening meal. The rhythm of the words is familiar, older than memory. You remember the village priest's visits during winter. His boots would leave puddles on your floor, and his breath would steam as he spoke of charity, patience, and faith. He always carried a small flask of spiced wine, which he shared liberally with those he visited. His laughter was loud, his sermons kind. You never feared him, though some did. A peculiar story still whispered among villagers tells of a saint who once warmed a frozen traveller by breathing on him. Some claim it was Saint Martin, others say it was a nameless monk who wandered the countryside healing frostbitten hands. The details change, but the meaning remains. Warmth given freely is the closest thing to holiness. The children are half asleep now, curled under their blankets. The cow shifts in her corner, hooves thudding softly against the floor. You move closer to the fire, letting its glow bathe your face. You close your eyes for a moment and listen to the breathing around you. Somewhere in that rhythm, you find your prayer again. It has no words this time. It is only a feeling, deep and steady, that life endures. The wind outside may scream, but inside there is still light. According to fragments of medieval hymns, people once believed that each flame carried a guardian spirit of its own, a small piece of divine presence that refused to die. You think of that now, watching the fire sway and hum. Maybe it is true. Maybe faith is simply the act of keeping the flame alive. The night deepens. You feed the fire one last time and lie down, the cross still glimmering faintly above you. In your half-sleep, the wind sounds almost like a choir far away, singing into the endless dark. You smile before drifting off, your last thought a quiet promise to rise again with the light. The fire has burned low again, but the room is not completely dark. A faint grey light seeps through the stretched skin of the window. You wake to the sound of gentle movement, the shuffle of feet, and the low hum of voices. Your spouse is already up, spinning wool in the corner, the spindle twisting and dipping like a pendulum. The children are helping sort dried beans, their fingers clicking softly against the wooden bowl. Winter mornings are slow, but never idle. The fields may sleep under snow, yet the hands of farmers never stop. Every tool, every garment, every piece of rope must be repaired before spring comes. You stretch, feeling the ache in your back, and rise to join the rhythm of work. Evidence from manorial estate records shows that winter labor was mostly indoor craft work. Spinning, weaving, basket making, mending tools, carving handles, each small task filled the endless dark hours. It was survival through patience rather than strength. You feel that truth in your bones as you sit down with your knife and a length of wood. You begin shaping a spoon, the shavings curling from the blade like ribbons. The smell of fresh wood mixes with the smoke of the fire, sharp and pleasant. Each scrape has a rhythm, a music of its own. The children glance over sometimes, curious, but return quickly to their sorting. Everyone has a role in keeping the household alive. A curious note from a traveller's journal written centuries ago describes the sight of entire families gathered around one hearth, each person working silently, the only sounds being the hiss of fire and the whisper of tools. The traveller called it a dance of survival without music. You think that is the most accurate description you have ever heard. Your spouse hums while spinning, the tune slow and lilting. The spindle hums with it, the fibers stretching into a thin thread that gleams in the light. The wool between their fingers looks like fog captured in motion. You have seen that same motion for years, yet it still feels like magic. From fleece to thread, from thread to warmth, every movement creates something that pushes back against the cold. According to guild records from Flanders and England, even rural homes produce small amounts of cloth for trade. Villagers sold coarse wool to merchants or bartered it for salt and oil. In that way, the labor of the hearth connected the poorest farmer to faraway markets. You imagine your thread or your spoon someday traveling beyond this valley, touched by hands you'll never meet. You pause for a moment to warm your fingers near the fire. The light dances over the half-shaped spoon. You feel a small pride in its curve, smooth and true. It will serve someone for years, maybe longer. Such small creations are the legacy of ordinary life. Beside you, your eldest child sits cross-legged, mending a torn tunic. Their stitches are clumsy, but you say nothing. Learning is a slow process, like winter itself. You remember your own early attempts? Your father shaking his head and then silently redoing every seam. Now you smile at the memory and let your child keep working. Mistakes are their own kind of warmth. An unusual practice recorded by local priests involved marking tools with tiny crosses before winter began. It was thought to bring luck and prevent injury during long indoor labor. You glance at the knife in your hand, its wooden handle worn smooth, and wonder if your father carved the faint mark near the base. You like to think he did. Hours pass quietly. The room fills with the smell of wood, wool, and faint sweat. Outside, the light shifts from grey to white, then begins to fade again. The sun barely lifts itself above the horizon this time of year. It feels as if the world itself is holding its breath. Scholars who study rural rhythms often debate whether medieval peasants ever rested. Some argue that winter brought rare moments of leisure, while others claim that survival left no room for idleness. You know from experience that both can be true. There are hours like these, slow but busy, where your hands move on their own while your mind drifts somewhere softer. It is work, but it is also peace. When the spoon is finished, you run your fingers along its edge. The surface is smooth and warm from handling. You hand it to your youngest, who hold it like a treasure. They test it in an empty bowl, pretending to eat, their giggles filling the room. For a brief moment, laughter replaces the wind outside. You glance toward the corner where a small pile of mended clothes sits neatly folded. Each stitch, each repair, is a silent victory. The house may be poor, but it is rich in persistence. Every fiber tells a story of endurance, and you can feel that story stretching behind you, through generations, unbroken. The fire hisses softly as a log collapses. You stir it with the poker, watching sparks leap upward and vanish. The rhythm returns the scrape of knife, the hum of spindle, the breath of children. Time itself feels different here, stretched thin like thread, steady as heartbeat. As darkness creeps in again, you set your work aside. The room glows with soft orange light. You feel tired but content, your muscles warm and your mind calm. The day's labor has filled the silence with meaning. Outside, the cold waits patiently, but inside, the hum of creation continues. You glance once more at your family, their faces lit by firelight, and realize that this quiet industry is its own kind of prayer. To keep making, mending, and shaping, even when the world freezes around you, is to affirm that life still matters. The night will come again, as it always does, but your hands will not be empty, and your heart will not be idle. That is how you survive the longest winter nights, by filling them with the soft rhythm of work and the quiet grace of creation. Outside, the wind carries the sound of distant bells. It is evening, and the village begins to stir with a gentle rhythm that feels older than memory. You step out for a moment, wrapping your cloak tight, and look down the snowy lane. Thin columns of smoke rise from every chimney, curling upward into the pale twilight. Each column is a sign of life, a fragile thread connecting one hearth to another. The air tastes of wood, smoke, and snow. You hear the muffled thud of an axe somewhere, followed by laughter. Someone is splitting kindling for the night. The faint clang of a pot lid rings from a nearby cottage. The world may look asleep, but beneath the frost, the village breathes together. Documents from medieval parish accounts often describe villages as single living organisms, each household part of a greater body. The baker depended on the farmer on the miller on the blacksmith. In winter, this web of need became even tighter. One family's warmth might save another's life. You walk toward the center of the hamlet, your boots crunching in the packed snow. The light from other cottages flickers across the ground, creating soft patterns that tremble with each gust of wind. You see your neighbor, old Thomas, hauling a bundle of sticks toward his door. His breath clouds the air like smoke from a second chimney. You nod, and he raises a hand in greeting, too tired to speak. A curious record from an English court roll describes how neighbors were legally required to help each other maintain hearth fires during extreme cold. If one house's fire died, the nearest family was obliged to share a burning stick. It was both charity and duty. The phrase, "to lend fire," still lingers in some villages today. You think of that as you pass a cottage and glimpse a woman kneeling by her hearth, coaxing a faint flame back to life. Inside your own home, the air feels warm and thick again. Your spouse is kneeling by the fire, stirring a pot of soup. The children are nearby, trading quiet jokes as they mend a torn basket. The smell of onions fills the room, rich and heavy. You sit down and listen to the familiar music of small tasks, the scrape of a spoon, the rustle of straw, the occasional soft cough. In many medieval communities, winter evenings were a time for stories. Chroniclers mention how families gathered together to share tales of saints, lost travelers, or mysterious lights in the snow. The spoken word was as vital as bread, feeding imagination when the body could find little else. You clear your throat and begin a story your father used to tell, your voice low and calm. It is a tale about a traveler who followed a lantern through a snowstorm, only to find it was carried by an angel disguised as a beggar. The children listen wide-eyed, the firelight catching in their eyes. The cow in the corner snorts softly, as if adding her own comment. You cannot help but smile. A peculiar medieval superstition claimed that telling stories near the hearth pleased the household spirits, who would bless the home with warmth and health. Some villagers even set aside a stool for an unseen guest, a place for the spirit to sit and listen. You remember your grandmother doing that once, and you glance now at the empty chair by the wall. It feels right to imagine someone there, smiling in the firelight. The night deepens. Outside, the snow falls thicker, softening every sound. The wind rattles the shutters, but the village endures. Through the walls, you can hear faint echoes of laughter and the occasional bark of a dog. Somewhere, a baby cries, and a woman's voice hums a lullaby in reply. Scholars studying medieval rural life note that communal strength was the heart of survival. Shared labor, shared meals, and shared warmth were not merely acts of kindness, but necessities of existence. A single, isolated household could not last a harsh winter alone. You think about this often, especially when you remember the stories of travelers who froze in the fields, too far from any friendly door. Your spouse ladles soup into wooden bowls. You thank them quietly before taking a spoonful. The broth is thin but hot. Each sip feels like sunlight caught in a cup. You look around the room at your family, at the flickering light on the walls, and you feel an almost sacred contentment. Outside, the church bell rings again, marking the late hour. Its sound is deep and slow, rolling over the rooftops and fading into the snow. You imagine every family hearing it, pausing in their own small rituals of survival. For a moment, the whole village moves in unison. each person breathing the same cold air, listening to the same ancient tone. Some researchers suggest that such rhythms of shared sound and sight created a sense of unity stronger than any written law. You think of it now as you lean back, watching the fire's glow flicker across your family's faces. In this moment, you belong to something vast and invisible, something older than any king or church. The wind eases a little. You stand and open the door to look outside once more. The snow has stopped falling, and the world glows under a faint moon. The village lies still, the roofs silvered, the chimneys whispering faint trails of smoke. You can almost feel the collective heartbeat beneath it all, slow and steady, like the breath of a sleeping creature. You close the door softly and return to the warmth. The fire hums, the soup smells sweet, and the laughter of your children drifts into the quiet. For a fleeting instant, the harshness of winter feels far away, replaced by the soft rhythm of a village breathing together through the cold. You know that tomorrow will bring frost and chores and aching muscles, but tonight you rest in the glow of shared endurance. This is not just survival, it is communion. The morning begins before the light. You wake to the sound of hooves shifting and straw rustling. The smell of warm animal breath mingles with the smoke from the dying embers, a heavy scent that clings to your clothes and hair. You stretch beneath your rough blanket, your bones stiff but ready. The cow lows softly, a gentle reminder that the day will not wait. You rise and pull on your boots. The air is sharp enough to sting your throat. The first task of every morning is the same. Check the byre, the small stable that shelters the lifeblood of the household. You push aside the wooden door and step into the dim, steaming dark. Warm air wraps around you instantly, thick with the scent of manure, hay, and breath. It is unpleasant, yet deeply reassuring. According to surviving farm accounts from the 13th century, animals were the true engines of rural life. They provided milk, strength, warmth, and, in the end, food. A family without livestock was a family on the edge of despair. You run a hand down the cow's flank, feeling her hide radiate heat like a living furnace. Her breath fogs the air, rhythmic and slow. The straw beneath your feet is damp, but soft. You grab a pitchfork and begin to turn it, lifting the old bedding and mixing it with clean hay. Each movement fills the byre with a faint rustle and a sweet, earthy smell. The work warms you quickly. Your breath joins the cow's in the heavy air, and together you create your own little climate of survival. An old man once told you that cows dream standing up, their minds filled with green pastures even in the heart of winter. You smile at the thought as you hear her chew, the steady rhythm of her jaw like a lullaby from the world before frost. Historical evidence shows that medieval farmers knew their animals intimately. They named them, talked to them, and often wept when one died. To outsiders, it might seem sentimental, but to you it makes perfect sense. Each creature carries a piece of your own endurance. You move next to the pigs, snuffling under their straw. They grunt happily as you pour scraps from a bucket into their trough. The sound of them eating fills the byre, wet and noisy, but strangely joyful. Pigs are stubborn survivors. They grow fat even in hunger, finding food in places you would never think to look. A curious observation recorded by a traveling physician in the 14th century noted that peasants often slept better when animals were close by. He speculated that the warmth and the rhythm of breathing soothed the human mind. You believe it. On nights when the wind howls like wolves, that steady breathing beside you feels like a promise that life endures. The chickens stir next. You reach beneath one and find a single egg, warm against your palm. The small miracle of it makes you pause. You slip it gently into your pocket, careful not to break it. One egg can turn a meal of broth into something nearly luxurious. The goat bleats softly, tugging at her rope. You scratch her chin and pour a bit of grain into her dish. Her eyes, square and wise, watch you with something that almost feels like understanding. You laugh quietly, your breath mixing with hers in the cold air. Accounts from early agricultural manuscripts mention that some farmers believed animals could sense coming storms before humans did. When cows grew restless or dogs whined without reason, the villagers prepared for snow or bitter wind. You think of that now as the goat suddenly stamps her hoof, snorting toward the door. Perhaps she knows something you do not. You finish your work and carry the milk bucket back toward the cottage. The handle bites into your fingers, cold against your skin. The liquid sloshes gently inside, pale and warm. When you enter the main room, the fire greets you with its soft glow. The air feels instantly lighter. You pour the milk into a clay pot near the hearth to keep it from freezing. Your spouse thanks you with a nod, already stirring a pot of porridge. The children yawn, rubbing their eyes, while the cat winds around your legs, hoping for a drop of milk. You laugh and pour a little into a wooden bowl. She licks it greedily, her tail flicking in contentment. Some scholars note that the warmth of animals may have made medieval homes smell terrible, but it also made them alive in a way that modern houses rarely are. You think about that as you sit down near the hearth, still feeling the heat of the fire on your skin. The air smells of smoke, hay, and milk. It is not pleasant, but it is honest. A peculiar practice found in Scandinavian farm accounts describes families deliberately piling manure near the outer walls of their cottages. As it decomposed, it gave off heat, creating a crude but effective insulation. You wonder whether the same happens here without you realizing it. Perhaps even the smell has its purpose. You take the egg from your pocket and hand it to your spouse, who cracks it carefully into the bubbling pot. The yellow swirl brightens the broth like a small sundae. The children cheer softly, knowing what that means. Today's meal will be better than most. Outside, the light grows stronger, reflecting off the snow so brightly that it hurts your eyes. You glance through the window and see your neighbor leading his oxen toward the frozen stream. They need water, as all living things do, even in a world made of ice. Academic discussions of medieval husbandry often emphasize how deeply intertwined human and animal lives were. The survival of one ensured the survival of the other. You feel that truth every morning when you hear your cow's first breath, when the pigs grunt in greeting, when the chickens murmur softly before dawn. Their warmth becomes your warmth, their life a mirror of your own. You finish your meal in silence, listening to the faint noises from the byre, the shuffle of hooves, the quiet sigh of a resting beast. Those sounds are as reassuring as the fire's crackle. Outside may be cold, but inside, surrounded by creatures and family alike, the world feels almost gentle. You take a final sip of milk, sweet and warm, and close your eyes. The day ahead will be long, filled with chores and snow, but for now, you sit in the calm heartbeat of your small home, where man and animal share the same fragile miracle of warmth. The afternoon light fades faster each day, as if the sun itself grows tired of fighting the frost. You glance toward the window, where the snow outside glows faintly pink. The fire hums in its usual rhythm, steady but never enough to chase the chill entirely from the room. You reach for your gloves, their wool stiff with wear, and begin to prepare for another small battle against the cold. Life in winter is a constant invention. You find ways to keep the heat where it belongs, to trick the body into believing it is warm. Every peasant you know has their own secret, their own trick passed down like an heirloom. Historical notes from manorial household lists mention that people often used hot stones wrapped in cloth to warm their beds before sleeping. You remember your grandmother doing that when you were a child. She would heat the stone near the hearth, then tuck it into the straw mattress before you climbed in. The warmth would last only an hour, but that hour felt like heaven. Tonight, you decide to do the same. You place a flat river stone by the fire, turning it slowly with a stick until it glows with trapped heat. The smell of scorched wood fills the air, sharp and dry. When it is ready, you wrap it in an old scrap of linen and place it under the blanket to wait for night. Nearby, your spouse sits sewing by candlelight, their needle flashing in and out of the fabric. The rhythm is calm, hypnotic. The children are kneeling by the hearth, toasting small pieces of bread on long sticks. Their laughter mingles with the crackle of the fire. For a moment, the world feels kind. According to surviving merchant records, small clay bed warmers filled with coals were a common luxury in wealthier homes. Peasants made do with simpler means. Some placed heated bricks or bottles filled with warm ale at their feet. A few even used live animals like cats or small dogs to share body heat through the night. You glance at the family cat now, curled into a tight ball by the fire, clearly fulfilling her role. A curious reference in an old traveller's letter tells of farmers in the Alps stuffing their boots with dried moss to keep their toes from freezing. Others lined their beds with layers of straw mixed with goose feathers, creating a primitive insulation. You have tried the straw trick yourself, and though it scratches, it does keep the cold from reaching your bones. You step outside for a moment, holding your cloak close. The cold strikes immediately, crisp and absolute. The snow crunches beneath your feet with a sound like breaking glass. Above, the sky is deep blue fading to black, a great silence stretching to the horizon. You can see faint trails of smoke rising from neighboring cottages. Each one glows faintly in the dusk, a mark of stubborn life against the white emptiness. When you return indoors, your fingers sting from the sudden warmth. You hold them close to the fire, watching the skin redden. Your spouse smiles faintly and hands you a mug of broth. You drink slowly, the steam curling into your face. It tastes of salt and onion, humble but soothing. Some fragments of medieval diaries describe evenings exactly like this. The small domestic rituals, the quiet companionship, the art of finding comfort in repetition. Scholars often debate whether these moments were truly peaceful or simply moments of exhaustion. You think it might be both. Peace, after all, often wears the disguise of fatigue. You check the stone in your bed again. It is still warm, humming faintly against the straw. You tuck the blanket tighter around it, already imagining the relief it will bring later. The fire has burned low, glowing more than flaming now. You stir the embers and add a small log, careful not to waste too much wood. Every piece is counted, every stick, a small coin in the currency of survival. Your spouse finishes their sewing and holds up a pair of mittens. They are rough, mismatched, and perfect. You thank them softly and slip them on. The wool is coarse, but it traps warmth quickly. The feeling of heat spreading through your fingers is almost tender. There is an old superstition whispered among weavers that the warmth of a handmade garment carries the soul of its maker. You have always liked that thought. Maybe that is why these mittens feel alive in your hands. You hear the wind rise outside again. It moves across the roof like a restless spirit, shaking loose bits of frost that fall with soft thuds. The shutters tremble but hold. Inside, the air smells of smoke and wool and faint sweetness from the toasting bread. The sound of the children's laughter softens into yawns. Before bed, you kneel to whisper a brief thanks, not to any saint or priestly name, but to the ordinary things. The fire that still burns, the stone that holds heat, the roof that has not yet leaked. Gratitude feels like another form of warmth. As you lie down, the bed feels surprisingly comfortable. The stone's heat seeps through the linen, chasing the cold from your legs. You pull the blanket close, feeling the familiar weight of straw beneath you. Your spouse settles beside you, their breath slow and steady. The children murmur in their sleep. Somewhere near the door, the cat sighs contentedly. Outside, the wind howls across the fields, but the walls stand firm. The world is ice, but inside, you are wrapped in small inventions, stones, mittens, straw, and the quiet stubbornness of love. You close your eyes, the warmth of the stone still pulsing faintly beneath you. In this fragile comfort, you understand something simple and profound. Survival is not about defying the cold. It is about learning to make peace with it, to meet it with patience, cleverness, and a spark of fire that never quite dies. The next morning begins in silence, the kind of silence that only deep winter knows. You wake to find frost clinging to the edges of your blanket, delicate as lace. Your breath hangs in the air, pale and ghostly. The fire has burned down to a dull orange glow. You sit up slowly, your body reluctant to leave what little warmth the bed still holds. The first task of the day is water. It is always water. You step outside with a wooden bucket, the cold biting your face like a slap. The well stands in the center of the village, a dark circle surrounded by white. The rope is stiff with frost, the handle frozen in place. You tap it with your glove, breaking the thin crust of ice, then begin to turn. The sound of the creaking wheel echoes faintly through the still air. Records from rural manors describe how villagers often had to break through thick ice just to reach drinkable water. Wells could freeze solid in the hardest winters, forcing families to melt snow for days at a time. You remember doing that once, years ago, when the frost reached so deep that even the earth seemed to shiver. The snow never gave enough, but it was all you had. You draw the bucket up carefully, the rope groaning. The water glints silver in the dim light, thick with shards of ice. You dip your fingers into it and feel a sting so sharp it burns. It is too cold to drink yet, so you carry it inside to warm by the fire. The bucket leaves wet trails on the floor, small dark lines against the packed earth. A peculiar entry in a medieval traveller's diary mentions that some villagers stored their water in barrels buried beneath layers of straw. The straw acted as insulation, keeping the contents from freezing solid. You tried the same trick once with a jar of ale, and it worked well enough. The memory makes you smile. Inside, your spouse is stirring the fire back to life, coaxing thin flames from the embers. You pour a little water into the pot to heat for washing. The children wake slowly, rubbing their eyes and breathing small clouds into the air. The smell of smoke mixes with the damp scent of thawing frost. You hand each of them a cup of warm water to drink. It tastes faintly of wood and metal, but it feels like life flowing back into their veins. You take a sip yourself and feel the cold retreat from your chest, inch by inch. According to monastery chronicles, ice was sometimes harvested deliberately in wealthier estates and stored in deep pits called ice houses. During summer, it was used to chill drinks or soothe fevers. The idea sounds absurd to you now. Surrounded by endless cold, you cannot imagine anyone willingly seeking ice. Outside, the stream that runs past the fields is frozen solid. You walk there with your neighbor, carrying an axe between you. The ice gleams blue under the weak sunlight. Together you begin to chip at it, each strike ringing like metal on stone. Shards fly, glittering like glass. The rhythm of your blows becomes a kind of music, steady and sure. After several minutes, the ice cracks open, revealing black water beneath. Steam curls up, ghost-like. You kneel and scoop some into your bucket, careful not to spill. The surface ripples once, then stills again. You can see your reflection in it, pale and tired but alive. A curious story told by old shepherds says that frozen water holds memories of the sky. When it melts, those memories return to the world as rain. You like that thought. Perhaps this very ice remembers summers you have forgotten. On your way back, the village seems quieter than usual. Smoke rises from every chimney, but no one speaks. Everyone is busy with the same task, tending to their own buckets, breaking their own ice. The sound of iron on ice echoes through the air like a shared heartbeat. Academic studies of medieval daily life often highlight how even the simplest acts, fetching water, mending clothes, feeding animals, formed the rhythm of existence. You feel that rhythm now, each motion part of a larger song of endurance. It is not glorious, but it is steady, and that steadiness is what keeps you alive. Back at the cottage, you pour a portion of the new water into a pot for cooking. The rest goes into a small barrel near the hearth, where the fire will keep it from freezing again. You wipe your hands dry on your tunic, feeling the rough fabric scrape your skin. The warmth in your palms is almost dizzying after the cold outside. Your spouse takes the bucket and adds a pinch of salt to the pot. The hiss of water meeting heat fills the room. The smell of steam rises, clean and comforting. You take a deep breath, savoring it. A fragment of a medieval sermon once advised villagers to give thanks for water, calling it the first mercy of the world. You remember hearing that as a child and not understanding it. Now you do. In the heart of winter, water is a gift that must be fought for every day. As the evening settles in again, you refill your mug with warm broth and sit by the fire. The bucket gleams faintly in the corner, droplets of melted frost sliding down its sides. You feel an odd affection for it, this simple vessel that carries so much of your labor and your life. Outside, the wind begins to rise, sweeping across the frozen fields. You can hear it moaning faintly through the cracks in the door. You take another sip, close your eyes, and listen to the water in the pot as it begins to bubble. Its soft murmur feels almost like speech, a reminder that even in a world made of ice, warmth still finds a way to speak. The cold tightens its grip. Each morning now, the frost creeps further across the floor before the fire wakes. Your fingers ache even before you touch anything. You move slower, more carefully, as if the very air resists you. Winter has grown cruel, and the world feels smaller with each breath you take. You light the fire again, but the logs hiss and spit. The wood is damp, not properly dried. Smoke rolls through the room before slipping up the chimney. You cough softly, waving it aside. The smell fills your nose, sharp and acrid, mingling with the sourness of your own breath. Your youngest child sneezes. Their cheeks are pale, their nose red. You press your hand to their forehead and frown. The skin feels too warm, the body trembling under the blanket. Illness always finds its way in when the nights grow long. Records from medieval parish registers reveal how fevers and lung sickness spread fastest in the cold months. Crowded homes, stale air, and damp straw made perfect breeding grounds for disease. A single cough could travel from one family to another before anyone even noticed. You know this too well. You have seen neighbors vanish from their doors, their houses falling silent within a week. You prepare a simple remedy. From a small jar near the hearth, you take a pinch of dried herbs, leftovers from summer's harvest, thyme, sage, and a few precious bits of honey. You boil them in water until the smell fills the room with warmth and hope. When it cools, you press the cup into your child's hands. They sip slowly, eyes half closed. An odd belief recorded by a traveling monk suggests that smoke from burning rosemary could chase away evil spirits of sickness. You recall your grandmother doing it once, the air thick with the smell of charred leaves. You think of trying it tonight, if only for the comfort of doing something. Outside, a dog barks in the distance, its voice carried on the wind. The sound feels lonely. You glance at your spouse, who sits by the fire spinning wool with tense shoulders. They say nothing, but you can see the same worry in their eyes. You both understand how fragile health can be. According to fragments of letters between physicians of the time, medieval medicine mixed faith with instinct. A healer might prescribe garlic, honey, or vinegar, but they might also whisper prayers to saints or mark crosses on a patient's chest. You have no doctor here, only the wisdom passed from one generation to another. Still, that knowledge has saved lives before. You take another log from the pile and feed it to the fire. The flames catch slowly, their light flickering over the faces of your family. Your eldest coughs too, though they wave it off with a smile. You pretend to believe them. A curious entry in a 15th century herbarium mentions a folk cure for fever, a piece of bread dipped in ale and placed beneath the pillow. If it was gone in the morning, the sickness had been carried away by invisible spirits. You wonder how many people were healed by faith alone. As the day drifts on, you keep the pot simmering, adding herbs as you find them. The scent of thyme and honey becomes your companion. The air grows heavy with steam, softening the sharpness of the cold. You spoon a bit into your own mouth, letting it soothe your throat. It tastes bitter but alive. Some scholars remain uncertain whether medieval peasants truly understood contagion. They knew that sickness passed through touch and air, yet they spoke of curses and bad luck instead of invisible causes. You find it strange to imagine life without knowing the names of your enemies, but perhaps ignorance was its own mercy. Your child sleeps now, their breath slow but steady. You wipe their brow with a damp cloth and whisper a quiet promise that they will see spring. You believe it because you must. The fire crackles again, stronger now. The warmth spreads slowly across the room. You take comfort in the sound, the rhythm of life continuing despite the weight of sickness. A curious superstition still lingers in your village. Never let the fire die completely, or death might enter with the cold. You keep that thought close, feeding the flames through the night even when your eyes ache with exhaustion. Outside, the wind grows louder, whistling against the roof. You pull your cloak tighter, feeling its rough wool scratch against your skin. Your spouse lays a hand on your shoulder. You look at each other for a moment. No words needed. This is how people endure, by sitting close, by tending the flame, by waiting. You take the herbs from the pot and hang them near the chimney to dry again. Every leaf matters. You do not know what tomorrow will bring, but tonight the fever has eased a little. That is enough. As the hours stretch on, the fire becomes the only heartbeat left in the room. You listen to it crack and sigh, thinking of all those who fought the same battle in winters long past. Illness, hunger, frost, they are as ancient as the snow itself. Yet here you are, still breathing, still watching the flame dance. You whisper a small prayer, not for miracles but for time. Another day, another sunrise, another chance for the body to heal. The night answers with silence, and somehow that feels like a blessing. The fever has passed, leaving the house quiet and heavy with relief. Your child sleeps deeply now, their skin cool and pale but no longer flushed. You move softly through the room, careful not to disturb them. The fire hums low, its light casting a gentle shimmer on the walls. For the first time in days, the air feels calm. You step outside, needing to breathe. The cold air is sharp but clean, clearing your lungs of the stale smoke inside. Snow blankets the village in soft mounds, and the trees glitter beneath a thin crust of ice. In the distance, you see a group of children sliding down a hill on pieces of wood, their laughter echoing like bells through the frost. It is strange, you think, how easily joy survives in the hearts of the young. Even when food is scarce and the wind cuts like a knife, they find something to play with. Their voices rise above the silence of winter, bright and unbroken. Accounts written by medieval chroniclers mention that children in rural villages often made their own toys from whatever they could find: twigs, bones, scraps of cloth, or carved bits of wood. They played with hoops, spun tops, or rolled frozen balls of snow long before anyone thought to call it a game. You smile, imagining your own children doing the same later when the chores are done. You watch the sky, a flat sheet of silver above the fields. Somewhere behind it, the sun waits, faint and tired. The air smells faintly of smoke and pine. You take another breath and let it fill your chest. For a moment, the cold feels almost kind. A curious entry from a village ledger notes that during particularly harsh winters, schools were sometimes closed for weeks. The cold froze ink, cracked quills, and made the walls of church schools too cold for writing. Instead, children stayed home to help mend clothes, patch roofs, and keep fires burning. Learning, like everything else, bent to the needs of survival. Inside the cottage, your eldest child is working near the fire, carving a small wooden figure from a scrap of oak. You watch as they chip carefully, tongue pressed between their teeth. The figure is rough but clear, a cow, you think, or maybe a dog. You praise the work, and they grin, cheeks flushed with pride. According to some letters left by monastic teachers, medieval parents encouraged small crafts as lessons in patience and skill. Children learn to shape, to mend, to value the effort behind every object they touched. You see the truth in that, as your child blows wood dust from their hands and looks up at you for approval. You prepare a meal, simple and light, a bit of bread, a thin broth made from yesterday's vegetables, and a slice of cheese. The cheese is hard from the cold, but the taste is sharp and comforting. The children eat quickly, their hunger constant and sincere. You watch them and feel a warmth that has nothing to do with fire. A peculiar folk saying claims that children's laughter kept the frost from creeping through the walls. You are not sure who first said it, but it feels true. Every giggle seems to lift the weight of winter a little, making the room brighter. As evening falls, you sit together, the family close to the hearth. The younger ones play with the wooden cow, marching it across the floor. Your spouse hums quietly, a tune that has no name but has always belonged to your home. The firelight flickers across their face, soft and golden. Scholars who study family life in the Middle Ages often argue about how children were treated. Some claim they were seen as miniature adults, expected to work and suffer alongside their parents. Others believe they were cherished, their innocence guarded as something sacred. Watching your own children now, you think both ideas hold a bit of truth. Work teaches them strength, but love keeps them whole. Outside, the snow begins again, thin flakes drifting in slow spirals. You step to the door and watch them fall, silent and endless. The night smells of smoke and cold iron. Behind you, laughter fills the house again, small voices retelling old stories with new endings. A fragment of a medieval lullaby, still sung in distant villages, says, "Sleep, child, while angels warm the sky." You hum those words now under your breath as you return to the fire. The melody is simple, the kind that feels older than language. You sit beside your sleeping child, brushing hair from their forehead. The skin feels soft, the pulse steady. You whisper a quiet thanks to whatever mercy spared them. The warmth of the fire touches your face, and for the first time in days, your shoulders loosen. The cat curls near your feet, purring faintly. The sound mingles with the soft breathing of your family. The fire crackles, and the wind outside has softened into a whisper. For a while, everything feels suspended, a moment of peace caught in the long stretch of winter. You realize, watching the children sleep, that survival is not just about keeping bodies alive. It is about protecting the laughter, the small joy that keeps despair at bay. You promise yourself that tomorrow, no matter how cold the day becomes, there will still be stories, still be play, still be light. You sit a little longer by the fire before lying down, the sound of the wind fading as your eyes grow heavy. The warmth, the breathing, and the faint echo of laughter carry you into sleep. The next day begins with a brittle stillness. The frost has thickened overnight, clinging to every surface in delicate white webs. The air feels heavier, sharper. When you open the door, the hinges groan as if they too resent the cold. Beyond the threshold, the path that leads through the village glitters like glass. You know what that means. The traders will be late. Trade in winter is a slow and dangerous dance. Roads vanish under snow, bridges freeze solid, and carts break their wheels in ruts hidden beneath the ice. Yet some merchants still travel, chasing the last scraps of profit before the season shuts them in. They bring salt, oil, iron tools, sometimes cloth or dried fish. You wait for them like one waits for the return of sunlight. Evidence from medieval merchant guild records shows that trade routes in winter were lifelines for remote villages. Salt, especially, was as precious as gold. Without it, meat spoiled and broth turned sour. You look at the small pot of salt in your kitchen, less than a handful left, and feel a flicker of worry. By midday, the sound of bells reaches your ears. You step outside and see them at last. A line of figures trudging through the snow, cloaks dusted white, their carts creaking behind them. The horse's breath hangs thick in the air. The sight draws others from their cottages, faces wrapped in scarves, eyes bright with curiosity. You walk down the path to greet them. The lead merchant lifts a gloved hand in greeting, his beard frozen into tiny icicles. He smiles, though his lips are cracked. His cart is piled high with sacks and bundles tied with rope. The smell of leather and smoke surrounds him. According to travelers' diaries from the 14th century, winter merchants were admired for their toughness and pitied for their risks. Many never made it home, caught by blizzards or robbed along lonely roads. Yet they kept coming, drawn by need and hope. You think of that now as you help unload a sack of coarse salt from the wagon. One of the merchants offers you a small pouch of grain in exchange for wool thread. The trade feels fair enough, though both of you pretend not to notice the strain of hunger in each other's eyes. Barter is not business in times like these. It is survival, wrapped in courtesy. A peculiar note from a Hanseatic ledger mentions that traders often carried small talismans against frostbite, bits of bone carved with suns or knots. You see one now hanging from the merchant's belt, a simple disc etched with circles. He catches your glance and nods knowingly, as if to say it works. You hope it does. The villagers gather around the wagons, voices rising in soft chatter. A child tugs at your cloak, pointing at a bundle of furs. The merchant unwraps them, revealing fox and marten, their colours rich even in the dull light. You touch one, surprised at the warmth that still lingers in the pelt. You trade a small carved spoon and a skein of wool for a strip of fur, enough to line a collar. It feels extravagant, almost sinful, yet you think of your children's cold fingers and decide it is worth it. Historical accounts suggest that barter markets like this were social events as much as economic exchanges. News travelled with the traders, tales of distant towns, rumours of wars, strange weather patterns. You listen as one man speaks of a frozen river so wide that entire herds crossed it without sinking. Another claims that fish were found frozen mid-swim near the coast. You do not know if he tells the truth, but the images stir your imagination. Scholars today often argue whether medieval trade brought comfort or inequality to small communities. To you it seems simple. Without the merchants, winter would swallow villages whole. Each sack of grain, each handful of salt, is a thread tying one world to another. As the afternoon fades, the merchants light a small fire near the edge of the square. The villagers share ale and bread with them, passing mugs around in good cheer. You join in, the taste of the ale warm and sharp on your tongue. For a little while, the cold feels distant, the fire's light shared by all. An old story told by merchants speaks of a saint who guided travellers through snowstorms, her lantern never dimming. They whisper her name before each journey, though none of them can agree which saint she was. You think of her now, watching the glow of their fire reflected in the snow. Perhaps she walks beside them still. When the traders finally pack up to leave, the villagers help push their carts back onto the frozen road. The sky is turning purple, the first stars faint above the trees. The bells on the horses jingle softly, fading as they disappear into the distance. You stand for a moment, listening to the silence that follows. The village seems smaller again without their noise and laughter. You clutch the strip of fur in your hand, its texture soft and strange. It smells faintly of smoke and travel, of places you will never see. Back in your cottage, you hang the fur near the fire to dry. The warmth releases a subtle scent, earthy and wild. You close your eyes and picture the merchant road winding through the night, lined with small fires that mark the endurance of humankind against the cold. You realize then that trade is not just about goods, it is about stories, courage, and connection. The road carries more than wagons, it carries hope, passed from one weary traveller to another, generation after generation. You add another log to the fire and watch the sparks climb upward. Somewhere out there, the traders walk beneath the same stars, their breath mingling with the wind. You whisper a quiet wish for their safety, then pull your cloak tighter, the faint scent of fur reminding you that even in winter, the world still finds ways to touch and sustain itself. The next morning dawns grey and hushed. The storm has passed, but the cold has grown deeper, so sharp it almost hums in the air. You step outside for a moment, and your breath turns to frost that floats away like dust. The world feels brittle, as if a single sound could shatter it. From the hill above the village, you can see two worlds divided by wealth. At the far end, beyond the cluster of small cottages, the manor house rises like a shadow against the snow. Its stone walls gleam faintly in the pale light, and a thin column of smoke drifts lazily from its great chimney. You imagine the fire that must be burning there, tall and bright, its heat filling rooms large enough to echo. In contrast, your own hearth still fights to keep a single room alive. You smile wryly. The fire in a lord's hall may roar louder, but warmth is still warmth, no matter its size. According to estate documents from the early 14th century, the difference between a peasant's winter and a noble's was measured mostly in comfort, not in safety. Both faced the same cold winds, the same frozen fields, the same short days. Yet the wealthy had fur-lined robes, thick stone walls, and servants to tend the flames. The poor had persistence and cleverness. You wonder sometimes which kind of warmth is stronger. Your spouse joins you at the door, squinting toward the manor. The wind carries faint sounds from that distance. Laughter, music, the low rumble of voices. The Lord must be hosting a winter feast. You both listen for a moment, half curious, half detached. The world of the manor feels close enough to see, yet far beyond reach. A peculiar note found in a steward's ledger describes how servants carried trays of spiced wine and roasted meat through the great hall while peasants huddled outside, drawn by the smell. Some received scraps as charity, others only the memory of what they could not have. You recall the times you were summoned there to deliver wool or grain, the warmth hitting you like a wall as you stepped inside. Today, the Lord's generosity reaches the village in the form of a messenger on horseback. He arrives wrapped in fine fur, his boots gleaming, his breath visible as he calls out greetings. He carries a basket of salted meat for the poorest families and a jug of ale for the church. Small gifts, but enough to stir gratitude. The villagers gather to watch, murmuring thanks. You bow your head as he passes, not out of awe, but custom. Scholars often discuss whether feudal generosity came from kindness or from duty. To you, it hardly matters. A gift of food is still food. The salt in the meat will preserve it for weeks. You carry your small share home and hang it by the hearth, feeling its weight with a quiet satisfaction. Inside the manor, the fire must glow golden against carved walls. The Lord's Hall was built for warmth, its hearth wide enough to hold whole logs. Historical records mention that such fires burned day and night, their smoke rising through tall chimneys instead of filling the room. You imagine long tables set with silver cups and bread that never goes stale. You picture the laughter echoing off the stone, the songs sung by musicians with red cheeks and full bellies. An odd anecdote from a traveller's letter tells of lords who placed heated stones at their feet during feasts so that the chill from the floor would never touch them. Even their dogs slept on fur cushions by the fire. You laugh softly at the thought, then glance down at your cat curled near the embers and decide that luxury is not such a distant thing after all. You sit by your own fire, slicing a small piece of the salted meat to add to the pot. The children watch eagerly as the smell fills the room. Your spouse sprinkles in a pinch of herbs saved from autumn, and together you wait for the water to boil. The broth grows rich and dark, and the taste, when you finally sip it, feels like a holiday in itself. Academic discussions about medieval class life often describe peasants as living on the edge of despair, but that view misses something quiet and important. You have seen moments of beauty even in hardship, the shimmer of frost on the thatch, the warmth of a neighbour's laughter, the miracle of a hot meal shared by many. The manor's walls may gleam, but your hearth holds a different kind of light. Outside, the church bell rings, calling the villagers to evening prayers. You glance toward the manor one last time. Its windows shine faintly through the dark, but you no longer envy them. The air inside your cottage smells of soup and smoke, and your children's laughter fills the small space. That is enough. Before sleeping, you pull your blanket higher and watch the fire's reflection dance across the wall. You think about how both rich and poor end their days the same way, seeking warmth, listening to the crackle of wood, and hoping the roof will hold through the night. A fragment of an old song drifts through your memory, one you heard from a travelling minstrel long ago. The Lord may feast, the peasant pray, yet both must bow to winter's sway. The tune hums softly in your chest as you close your eyes. In the stillness, you feel something close to peace. The world beyond your door can keep its silver and wine. Here, in the quiet glow of your small fire, you find a richness that even stone halls cannot match. The longest night of winter has arrived, and the village feels suspended in time. The air outside glitters with frost, and the moon hangs low and full over the fields, bright enough to make the snow shine like silver dust. You can feel the hush of anticipation in everything, as if the world itself is waiting for something to happen. Inside the cottage, your fire burns brighter than usual. You have been saving the best logs for this night, knowing it is when the cold bites deepest. The flames climb eagerly, throwing light into every corner. The air smells of wood, smoke, and a faint sweetness from the pot simmering on the hearth. This night is not only a test of endurance, it is also a celebration. Throughout Europe, peasants marked the turning of the year with feasts, songs, and rituals that blended old beliefs with newer faith. Historical records from church archives describe priests blessing fires at midnight, while villagers danced and drank outside, their laughter echoing through the dark. Your family gathers close, and your spouse ladles stew into wooden bowls. It is thicker than usual, rich with lentils, turnips, and a bit of salted meat. The children eat quickly, their cheeks glowing in the firelight. You raise a cup of ale and whisper a simple toast to the year ahead, to the warmth that has not failed, and to the promise of light returning. An old local custom says that if the fire burns steadily through the night, spring will come early. You plan to keep it alive until dawn, feeding it with the last of your best wood. There is comfort in the crackle of the flames, in the way the light makes the shadows dance. A curious tradition recorded in Scandinavian chronicles mentions the practice of drinking to the ancestors on midwinter night. A cup of ale or mead was poured onto the hearth in remembrance of those who endured winters past. You follow the gesture quietly, tipping a few drops into the fire. The flames hiss, then flare as if in reply. For a brief moment, you imagine unseen faces smiling in the glow. Outside, faint music drifts through the air. You open the door and see a group of villagers walking from house to house, singing in low voices. Their songs are old, the words half forgotten, but their rhythm is familiar and comforting. You wave them in, and soon your small cottage fills with laughter and steam from the fire. A man with a fiddle begins to play. The melody twists and spins, warm and playful. The children clap, the cat bolts under the bed, and even your spouse smiles as they hum along. The sound feels like sunlight in the middle of darkness. Accounts from medieval court records reveal that village festivals often worried the local priests. Too much laughter, too much ale, too much memory of pagan joy. Yet even the church bells could not silence the songs that had survived since before written history. You think of that now, as one of the singers jokes that every flame in every cottage is an offering to the same invisible Sunday. The ale jug passes around, and you take a small sip. It tastes stronger than you remember, spiced with herbs and warmth. Someone shares a story about a man who tried to drink away the cold until he mistook a snowdrift for his bed. Everyone laughs, and for a moment, the winter outside feels far away. The laughter fades gradually into quiet conversation. The music slows, becoming almost like a lullaby. You find yourself staring into the fire again, the orange light flickering across your hands. The warmth feels alive, steady, and kind. A peculiar belief noted in an old herbal compendium suggests that midwinter flames have healing powers if stared at long enough. The author claimed that fire in the dark restores the strength of the spirit. You do not know if that is true, but it feels true tonight. Your guests begin to leave, wrapping their cloaks tightly. You stand in the doorway as they disappear into the snow, their voices fading into the distance. The air outside is cold enough to sting your teeth. The moon has climbed higher, casting long silver shadows across the fields. You stay there for a moment, listening. The village is alive with quiet celebration, distant songs, the occasional bark of a dog, the echo of laughter carried by the wind. It feels like every heart is beating together, holding back the dark for one more night. Inside, the fire continues to burn. You sit near it again, wrapping your hands around a mug of ale. The children are already asleep, their faces peaceful. Your spouse hums softly as they clear the bowls. You look into the fire until your eyes sting, the shapes shifting and shimmering like memories. Scholars still debate how much of these winter festivals was superstition and how much was faith. To you, it makes no difference. What matters is the warmth, the gathering, the reminder that even in the darkest time of year, people still choose to light fires and sing. You stretch out beside the hearth, the sound of the wind fading behind you. The flames have softened to a steady glow, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. You whisper a final wish into the quiet, that the fire will greet the sunrise still burning, proof that life, once lit, refuses to fade. The glow from the midwinter fire lingers in your memory long after dawn returns. A pale light fills the cottage now, quiet and gentle. The air smells faintly of smoke and spent ale. You stretch your hands before the hearth, the warmth sinking into your skin. Outside, the snow has fallen again, soft and endless, covering all traces of last night's laughter. You stir the ashes, letting the embers breathe once more. Tiny sparks leap upward like stars before fading into grey. The house feels still, too still, as if waiting for sound to return. The children sleep longer today, worn out from celebration. Your spouse sits beside you, spinning thread, their motions slow but sure. In every winter, there comes a strange morning when joy feels fragile, when silence returns heavier than before. This is that morning. You glance toward the window and see your reflection faintly in the stretched skin that serves as glass. The image trembles in the cold air, pale and thoughtful. Superstitions thrive in this season. In almost every village, people whisper about things best left unnamed, spirits that wander at night, sounds in the wind, and the old shapes of winter mischief that never fully died out. Monks tried to stamp them out, but some memories resist forgetting. Written notes from medieval sermons reveal how priests warned their flock against foolish customs of the dark season. They spoke of witches who danced on frozen hills and ghosts who followed travelers home. Yet the same priests lit candles on the same nights, perhaps not fully free of the same fear. You remember what your grandmother once told you. Her voice, low as a storm outside, rattled the shutters. She said that the frost itself had a spirit, a pale woman who walked between houses searching for warmth. If she found a hearth gone dark, she would slip inside and breathe on those who slept, turning them to ice. As a child, you believed her without question. An odd detail preserved in a Scandinavian manuscript tells of villagers hanging small bits of bread above the hearth to appease this frost spirit. You find yourself smiling at the memory. You never saw such a creature, but you still check the fire before bed, just in case. Today, as the snow falls thicker, you hear a soft knocking at the door. When you open it, your neighbor stands there, face hidden beneath a hood of fur. He carries a bundle of straw figures tied with red thread. His eyes crinkle with a grin. "For luck," he says, handing one to you. "These straw charms," he explains, "are meant to guard against illness and misfortune. Each figure represents a soul of the household, bound to the fire's protection. He has made one for every family in the village. You thank him and hang it above the hearth, where it sways gently in the rising heat." Records from the British Isles mention similar charms. Straw men and woven crosses hung in kitchens to call back the Sunday. Some were blessed by priests, others simply tied by the hands of farmers. Scholars argue about where these customs began. Some say they are remnants of older pagan rites. Others claim they were harmless gestures of faith. You suspect they were both. The snow continues to fall outside, muffling all sound. The world feels wrapped in white silence. Inside, the straw figure casts a small shadow against the wall, flickering with every movement of the fire. You watch it for a while, feeling oddly comforted. Your spouse finishes spinning and begins to hum. The tune is one you recognize, an old village song that warns against walking in the fields after dusk. The melody twists like smoke, beautiful but faintly haunting. You hum along, the two of you singing softly into the cold. A curious reference from a 12th century chronicler describes peasants singing such songs as a way to keep evil spirits away. The belief was that music could confuse wandering souls, keeping them from finding your door. You like the idea that sound itself might guard you. As darkness falls again, the firelight grows stronger, painting gold across the walls. The children wake, rubbing their eyes, asking for stories. You tell them one your grandmother once shared, about the frost woman who turned cruel only when forgotten. They listen with wide eyes, their faces glowing in the firelight. When you finish, they laugh nervously and glance toward the window, half believing. Scholars today often debate how deeply superstition shaped the daily life of medieval people. Some call it fear, others call it poetry. You think it might be both. Fear creates stories, and stories make the cold less empty. Before bed, you check the fire again, adding one more log for good measure. The straw figure sways gently above it, the threads gleaming red in the light. Outside, the wind sighs softly, almost like breathing. You whisper a short goodnight to the frost beyond the door, just as your grandmother taught you. Then you climb into bed beside your family, the blankets heavy and warm. The snow falls quietly through the night. Somewhere outside, the trees creak, and the sky glows faintly with moonlight. You close your eyes, listening to the fire, the breathing, and the endless hush of winter. In that fragile peace between fear and comfort, you drift into sleep, dreaming of warmth that never fades. The night has passed without trouble, and when you wake, the world outside has turned to white silence again. Snow lies deep against the cottage walls, muffling every sound. The air feels so still that even your breath seems afraid to move. You rise slowly, wrapping yourself in your cloak, and open the door just enough to look outside. The light is soft and blue, and the whole village seems asleep beneath a blanket of frost. You step out, boots sinking into the snow with a soft crunch. The sky is heavy with clouds that hide the sun, but the reflection of the snow makes everything glow faintly. You walk toward the edge of the field, and for a moment you stop just to listen. There are no birds, no wind, no footsteps, only the faint whisper of snowflakes landing on snow. It is a sound that feels less like noise and more like breathing. According to writings left by monastic observers, medieval villagers often described this kind of silence as holy. It was said that on certain winter mornings, the world paused to listen to itself. The monks wrote that silence was not emptiness but presence, a moment when even the cold seemed to bow its head. You understand that now. The stillness feels alive. Your footsteps lead you past the byre, where the animals shift quietly. Steam rises from the roof, marking their warmth within. You smile at the sight. Even now, the smallest signs of life look like miracles. The snow clings to your cloak, melting into dark spots that soon freeze again. A curious entry from an old traveler's notebook describes how people once claimed to hear music in falling snow, faint notes drifting through the air. He called it the whisper of angels. You tilt your head, half smiling, listening. There is no music that you can name, but something about the hush feels like a song anyway. You walk farther, to the small rise overlooking the frozen stream. The ice below gleams pale silver, cracked in lines like veins. It seems fragile yet unmoving, strong enough to carry the world. You kneel and brush the surface with your glove. The cold bites instantly, and you pull your hand back, watching the faint mark your touch leaves behind. According to records of early natural philosophers, frost fascinated people long before they understood it. They thought of it as a living force, a creature that grew overnight, covering the earth with glassy scales. One scholar wrote that frost feeds upon silence. The phrase lingers in your mind, fitting perfectly with the world around you now. You sit quietly, your breath curling upward in thin threads. For a moment, you allow yourself to feel small, part of the frozen earth rather than above it. Everything is still, and the air tastes clean, untouched. From far away, you hear a single sound, a crow calling, rough and lonely. Its voice cuts through the silence like ink across paper. You watch it glide over the trees, a dark smudge against the endless white. When it disappears, the world grows quiet again, but not empty. The stillness feels full of hidden life. A curious passage in a medieval weather chronicle tells of peasants who believed snow carried secrets from heaven. Each flake, they said, was a letter that vanished before it could be read. You think about that now, holding out your hand to catch a few falling flakes. They melt instantly against your skin, leaving nothing but cold and memory. You turn back toward the village. Smoke curls upward from a few chimneys, pale against the grey sky. Somewhere, a door opens, and the faint sound of a cough drifts across the distance. The living world is stirring again. You walk slowly, enjoying the quiet before the noise of chores begins. Scholars today still puzzle over how medieval people balanced hardship with beauty. So many days were spent in struggle, yet they wrote of wonder constantly. You think perhaps it was the silence that taught them. When everything else is stripped away, what remains is the small grace of being alive in the midst of it all. Back inside your cottage, the warmth feels almost startling. The fire crackles, and the scent of smoke wraps around you like a blanket. Your spouse looks up from stirring a pot, their face calm and bright in the glow. The children chat quietly, still half asleep. You stand for a moment, letting the contrast between inside and outside settle deep into you. You pour yourself a small cup of warm ale and sit by the window. The world beyond the thin skin pane still glows pale and distant. You can almost see the air move in slow waves, like breath across a sleeping body. An ancient fragment of poetry, copied in a monk's hand, describes this very moment. The world breathes white, and man is small within it. Yet he breathes also, and thus the world endures. You whisper those words softly to yourself, not as a prayer but as a reminder. The children run outside after breakfast, their laughter piercing the calm. Their boots stamp fresh prints into the untouched snow, erasing the stillness but replacing it with life. You watch them and smile. The song of silence has ended for now, replaced by the brighter melody of living voices. You realize, watching them, that survival is not only about keeping warm, it is also about seeing beauty in the quiet moments, about listening to the hush and finding peace within it. Even in the coldest season, the world still speaks, sometimes loudly, sometimes softly, but always to those willing to listen. You turn back to the fire, feeling its warmth climb into your hands again. Outside, the snow continues to fall, silent and steady. You breathe in the scent of wood and wool, and the cottage hums softly around you. The silence you carry from the field stays in your chest, gentle and bright, like the glow of the fire that will see you through another night. The silence of the snow gives way to the rhythm of work again. After days of stillness, your hands itch for something to do. The fire is steady, the animals fed, but the tools that rest along the wall remind you that even in the dead of winter there is preparation to be done. You rise early, the sky outside a dull pearl grey. The frost that covers the window turns the light soft and milky. You touch the iron latch of the chest near the hearth, lifting its lid to reveal the tools of your trade. The smell of oiled wood and rusted metal fills the air. Inside lie the plough blades, spades, and the handles that have survived another year. You take each one out carefully, running your fingers over the worn edges. Records from medieval manor accounts show that winter was a time for repair and readiness. When fields froze solid, the farmer became a craftsman. Tools were sharpened, handles replaced, and ropes twisted anew. Every blade honed in January meant an easier harvest come summer. You think about that as you set your grindstone near the light and begin to turn it slowly. The scrape of iron fills the room, bright and sharp against the hush. Sparks leap briefly, glowing before they vanish into air. Your hands grow warm from the effort, and you can feel the weight of time in each movement. The blade hums faintly, alive again after months of rest. A curious passage from a craftsman's diary speaks of men who swore they could hear their tools speak while sharpening them, as if the metal remembered the soil it once cut. You understand the sentiment. As the edge catches the light, you imagine the plough slicing through thawed earth, the smell of soil rising like a promise. Your spouse sits nearby, mending a harness with careful stitches. The children help by sorting small nails and scraps of leather, their fingers nimble despite the cold. The work becomes a quiet symphony, the hiss of metal, the soft rip of thread, the creak of wood. According to guild manuals from the 15th century, winter craftsmanship was not simply maintenance but an act of reverence. A well-kept tool was said to carry luck into the next planting. You think of that now as you oil the handle of your axe, the scent of linseed rising like warmth itself. The fire pops behind you, and a log collapses inward. You pause to add another, the smoke curling upward in lazy shapes. For a moment, you let the glow of the fire reflect on the sharpened blade in your hand. The contrast between light and steel is strangely comforting. An old superstition claims that dull tools bring dull luck. Farmers in your region once left their blades outside under the moon to drink in strength. You never tried it. Though your father swore it worked, you still remember him standing in the frost, holding a sickle toward the sky as if it could gather light. You smile at the memory, feeling the quiet ache of nostalgia. As the day passes, you move from one tool to another, your motions steady and patient. The world outside might be frozen, but inside your hands the work feels alive. The sound of the grindstone becomes the heartbeat of the house, slow and sure. Scholars of rural life often point out how winter gave peasants their only time to think. With no fields to till, minds wandered as hands worked. You find your own thoughts drifting now, to the coming thaw, to the smell of rain, to the sound of streams running wild again. The thought fills you with a soft, aching hope. Your eldest child watches as you bind the handle of a spade with new leather. They ask why you bother, when the ground is still hard as stone. You smile and tell them that spring always comes, and when it does, those who are ready will waste no day waiting. They nod slowly, as if this is a lesson about more than just tools. Later, you step outside, carrying the sharpened plowshare into the pale light. The cold air hits your face, fresh and raw. You hold the blade up to the sky, watching it catch the faint glow of the sun behind the clouds. For a moment, it looks almost golden. A fragment of an old farming song comes to mind. Sharpen the blade while the ground sleeps still, and it will cut twice when the spring wakes. You hum the tune softly, letting it warm your breath. The words taste of faith in things unseen. Back inside, your spouse finishes sewing the harness and holds it up for inspection. The stitches gleam tight and even. You nod approvingly. The children clap, proud of their work. You hang the tools neatly by the door, their edges shining in the firelight like small suns waiting to rise. The evening settles gently. The room smells of oil, smoke, and worn leather. You sit beside the fire with tired hands and a calm heart. The grindstone rests silent now, its surface cool and grey. The tools gleam softly against the wall, ready for the world that sleeps beneath the snow. Scholars sometimes say that winter was the farmer's pause, but you know better. It is not a pause. It is a deep breath, a moment of quiet creation before the labour begins again. You feel it in your bones, that slow gathering of strength. You stretch your fingers toward the fire, feeling warmth sink deep into your palms. Tomorrow, you will sharpen the scythe and mend the fence rope. For now, you listen to the soft hiss of the fire, the steady breathing of your family, and the quiet hum of the tools that wait like loyal companions for the return of the Sunday. Morning arrives pale and quiet. The air feels heavier now, as if the cold has thickened into something solid. You rise and stoke the fire, watching the flames struggle before they finally catch. The smoke curls upward, filling the cottage with its familiar, comforting scent. You breathe it in deeply, then glance at the stack of wood by the wall. It has grown smaller. Winter is not finished with you yet. The children still sleep, bundled tightly under their blankets. You step outside, the door creaking softly behind you, and look toward the village road. The world is wrapped in fog. The trees stand motionless, their branches weighted with frost. Each breath you take forms a ghost that lingers before vanishing. It is beautiful and cruel at once. You walk to the church at the edge of the village, where the records of weather and time are kept by the priest. The wooden door groans as you push it open, and a rush of cold air follows you inside. The church smells of wax, old stone, and a faint trace of incense. The priest sits at his desk, bent over a thick book, his quill scratching slowly. According to these old records, winters have always been unpredictable. Some are short and mild, others stretch for months without mercy. You glance over the parchment and see drawings of frost patterns, dates of great freezes, and notes on strange occurrences. A river frozen hard enough to walk across, a summer snow in the year of famine, a night when the stars were said to burn red. A curious entry catches your eye. It tells of a winter so cold that even the sea froze near the coast, trapping ships in ice. Fishermen lit fires on the frozen waves to keep from freezing themselves. You imagine the sight of flames burning on water, and the image stays with you, eerie and magnificent. The priest looks up and smiles wearily. He says that each year he adds another page, though the stories rarely change. Cold, hunger, sickness, prayer. It is always the same pattern, the same rhythm of endurance. You nod, knowing that truth too well. Outside the church, a group of children are gathering snow into small piles. Their laughter cuts through the stillness, a sound so bright it startles the crows from the trees. You watch them a moment, smiling despite yourself. They are making small figures, crude and lopsided, decorating them with twigs and bits of cloth. Their joy feels like defiance against the frozen world. Scholars studying these chronicles often speak of how villagers marked time through such stories, not calendars. Seasons were counted by memory. The year of the great frost, the year the river froze, the year the firewood ran out. Every entry in the priest's book is a reminder that people have always measured life not by comfort, but by what they survived. You return home carrying that thought like a small flame in your chest. The fog has thickened now, turning the world into shades of white and grey. You can barely see the next cottage, only faint outlines in the mist. The snow muffles your footsteps, and the silence feels immense. Back inside, your spouse has placed a pot of porridge over the fire. The smell of oats fills the room. The children are awake now, their faces rosy with warmth. You tell them about the frozen sea, and they listen with wide eyes. The youngest asks if people could skate across it. You laugh softly and say perhaps they could. According to travelers' accounts from those times, entire festivals were held on frozen rivers. Merchants set up stalls, musicians played, and people danced upon the ice as if winter itself were a floor for celebration. You can almost see it in your mind, the lights, the laughter, the sound of skates cutting smooth arcs into glass. A peculiar report from the same records mentions a night when the aurora filled the sky, turning it green and violet. People thought it was a sign from heaven, either warning or blessing. The priest wrote that the villagers prayed all night while children pointed and laughed at the colors. The idea makes you smile. Fear and wonder often share the same sky. Your spouse hands you a bowl, and you eat slowly, savoring the warmth that spreads through your body. You can hear the wind outside again, soft but persistent, brushing against the walls. The straw figure above the hearth sways slightly, its red thread glinting. Later, you take out an old parchment scrap from a chest, a letter written long ago by a merchant who once stayed in the village. His handwriting is uneven but lively. He wrote of that same frozen river, of men skating with torches in their hands, their reflections glowing in the ice. He said it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. You keep that letter because it reminds you that even in hardship, beauty finds a way. Scholars still discuss whether the so-called Little Ice Age truly changed the course of human history. Some claim it reshaped economies and faith itself. Others believe it merely tested what was already fragile. To you, such questions feel distant. What matters is that you have fire, food, and the memory of warmth. As evening falls, you sit by the fire again, your family close beside you. The priest's tales and the merchant's letter blend in your thoughts. The world has frozen before, and yet here you are, still breathing, still tending flame. The snow outside thickens again, swirling softly against the door. You realize that the chronicles, the letters, the stories all are just ways of saying the same thing. People have always found a reason to continue. Whether it is a song, a prayer, or a fire on the ice, life keeps moving forward, quietly, patiently, until the thaw returns. You lean closer to the hearth, watching the sparks rise and fade. Each one seems like a small record of your own, a fleeting entry in the long history of survival. You whisper to yourself that tomorrow you will write something too, even if it is only a line. The fire burned. We endured. The snow has thinned at last. Not gone, but softened, its hard edges melting into slush beneath the faint light of morning. You can smell damp earth again, that rich scent of soil waking after long silence. It is faint, but it fills your chest like hope. You step outside, and the air feels different. It still bites, yet not with cruelty. Somewhere beneath your boots, water trickles, shy and secret. The sound is like a whisper from the hidden streams returning to life. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the faint sunlight touch your face. Life begins to stir around the village. You hear a door open, the creak of a cartwheel, the murmur of neighbors greeting one another. After so many weeks of isolation, the sound of voices feels new and strange. You wave to old Thomas, who is dragging a broken fence post toward his yard. He grins and calls out that spring will come early this year. You decide to believe him. Inside, the cottage feels lighter too. The smoke that once hung low now drifts lazily toward the chimney. The air no longer carries the heavy scent of damp straw and sweat. You open the door wider to let in the breeze, and it feels as if the whole house breathes with you. Your spouse hums as they fold a pile of mended clothes. The children are playing near the hearth, their laughter soft and familiar. For the first time in months, you do not hear coughing. You notice color returning to their faces. The sight fills you with quiet gratitude. Records from local parish letters mention how even the smallest change in season lifted spirits in winter-worn villages. One priest wrote that a single patch of thawed earth could stir men to tears. You understand that completely. You feel that same swelling warmth now, seeing the grey snow shrink at the edges of your field. You decide to walk to the nearby stream, carrying a bucket though you do not truly need it. The path is slick, the snow thin and spongy underfoot. Birds flit through the trees again, calling in short, uncertain notes. The sound startles you. It has been so long since you heard song instead of silence. A curious note from a travelling monk's journal mentions that peasants often believed birds carried messages from the saints at the end of winter. When the first robin appeared, villagers would stop their work and whisper a prayer of thanks. You find yourself doing the same when you see a small brown bird perched on a bare branch. Its feathers ruffle in the wind, and it chirps once before flying away. The stream itself is half frozen, but where the ice has cracked, water runs fast and clear. You crouch and touch it with your fingertips. It feels alive, cold but clean. You fill your bucket just for the pleasure of hearing the splash. The surface ripples like liquid glass, and for a moment you see the sky reflected perfectly within it. According to accounts from medieval weather watchers, such thaws often marked a brief respite before another wave of frost. Yet people always hoped each one would be the last. You know that hope well. You choose to believe this one will hold. You linger by the stream, watching mist rise where water meets cold air. Your thoughts drift to those who did not survive the season. Every village loses someone to the long nights, and grief in winter feels heavier than at any other time. Yet even grief softens with the thaw. You whisper their names quietly, letting the wind carry them away. When you return home, the village feels busier. A few neighbors are clearing snow from their roofs, others mending fences or leading animals out for air. Everywhere you look, hands are moving, ready to build again. The rhythm of work sounds like a song you have almost forgotten. Scholars who study seasonal life in the Middle Ages often speak of the emotional rebirth that came with the first thaw. People laughed more easily, argued less, shared food without counting portions. You see it now in the way Thomas helps a widow fix her gate, in the way two children chase each other across the wet ground, splashing in melted snow as if it was summer rain. Inside your home the fire burns lower, but you do not mind. The air carries its own gentle warmth. Your spouse has placed a vase on the table, filled with dry twigs and one tiny sprig of green. You do not know how it found life in this weather, but it glows faintly in the light from the window. A curious observation from a medieval herbalist's notebook claims that the first plants to break the frost carry blessings in their roots. People would dig them up carefully and hang them above their doors to keep misfortune away. You make a note to look for some tomorrow. The evening comes quietly. You sit by the window with your cup of broth and watch the light fade over the fields. The snow glows faintly, turning from white to pink to blue, until it is only shadow. The sound of dripping water fills the silence like soft music. Your spouse joins you, resting their head on your shoulder. Neither of you speaks for a long time. You simply listen together to the sound of the thaw, the quiet heartbeat of the changing season. Scholars still debate whether hope is learned or instinctive. You think it is neither. Hope is simply what happens when the cold finally loosens its grip and the sound of running water returns to the world. It rises naturally, like breath after too long holding still. You set your cup down and watch the final embers fade. Tomorrow there will be more work to do, but tonight you allow yourself to rest. The thaw has begun. The air smells faintly of soil and life. For the first time in months, you drift to sleep without shivering, the sound of melting snow outside your window steady as a lullaby. Morning light spills gently into the cottage, not white and harsh as before, but golden. The frost on the window has melted into small droplets, each one catching the sunlight like a jewel. You sit up slowly, the straw mattress creaking beneath you, and listen. Somewhere beyond the walls, a drip of water falls from the thatch, steady as a clock. It is the first true sound of spring. You push open the door, and the air rushes in, soft and damp. smelling of mud and thawed earth. The snow still clings in shaded hollows, but the ground beneath your feet feels different now, pliant, alive. The road through the village glistens with puddles, and thin tendrils of mist curl across the fields. You breathe deeply, feeling the cold fade from your lungs. This is the scent of beginnings, of everything that once slept now waking. You can almost hear the soil stirring beneath its crust, the worms and roots stretching toward life again. According to manorial planting records, this moment was the most sacred of the farming year. Every winter ritual, every prayer, every long night by the fire led to this. The first signs of the thaw were not just a change in weather, but a promise that the world still kept its ancient rhythm. Farmers called it the whisper of the ground, and you feel it now in your bones. You walk to the edge of the field, where the snow has retreated enough to reveal dark, wet furrows. The soil is soft beneath your boots, and a faint steam rises from it as the morning sun warms its surface. You kneel and press your hand into the earth. It is cold but forgiving, clinging to your fingers like a handshake from an old friend. A curious account from a 14th century agrarian diary describes how villagers would touch the soil to their lips at the first thaw, believing it brought good fortune. You decide to try it, tasting the faint bitterness of iron and salt. It feels like a small prayer. Behind you, the village stirs to life. You hear doors opening, laughter, the creak of carts being rolled from storage. Smoke rises from every chimney, not thick and desperate this time, but light and grey. The air is filled with voices again, and you realize how deeply you had missed the sound of people living instead of merely enduring. Your neighbor calls out a greeting as he leads his oxen toward the road. He waves a gloved hand and says the ground will be ready soon for ploughing. His voice carries a hint of joy. The oxen snort steam into the air, their coats gleaming with a thin sheen of melted frost. You wave back, sharing his smile. According to chronicles written by rural clerks, this season of awakening often began with gatherings of the entire village. People repaired fences, cleared ditches, and rebuilt whatever winter had broken. You see that pattern forming already. Children run between houses with armfuls of straw, women sweep the thresholds, and men test their tools in the warming air. You return home to find your spouse laying fresh rushes on the floor, the scent of green reeds replacing the musty smell of old straw. The cat stretches in a beam of sunlight, lazily swatting at a fly that has wandered in through the open door. The world inside feels lighter, as if it too has taken a deep breath. An old belief, written in a parish songbook, said that sunlight at the thaw could heal melancholy. It was called God's gentle fire. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth touch your face, and you understand why someone might think so. The children burst in, breathless and laughing, holding small treasures they have found outside, a half-frozen flower, a feather, a pebble smoothed by the stream. They spread them on the table as if presenting gifts. You praise each one, though you know the true gift is their laughter echoing through the house again. As afternoon fades, you walk once more to the field. The light has softened into amber, and the last of the snow glows faintly before it disappears. You stand still, listening to the water running beneath the soil, the quiet hum of rebirth. Scholars of medieval life often describe spring as a rebirth not only of the land but of faith itself. After months of silence, the thaw returned people to prayer, not out of fear but gratitude. You feel that same impulse now, though no words come. You simply bow your head, letting the warmth of the sun settle into you. Your spouse joins you, their hand finding yours. Together you watch the sky fade from gold to grey, the world around you wet and shining, alive once more. You do not speak. There is nothing to say that could improve the moment. When you return home, the air inside feels gentler, the fire small but steady. You eat your evening meal slowly, savouring every bite. The stew tastes richer than usual, though you know it is made of the same humble things. Perhaps hunger tastes different when paired with hope. Before sleep, you step outside again. The moon is high, pale and kind. The fields gleam faintly with melting frost. You can hear water dripping from the trees, each drop marking the slow retreat of winter. You whisper a quiet thanks to the night, to the thaw, to the fire still burning behind you. You close the door softly and lie down, the warmth of the hearth on your skin. The world is no longer frozen, it is breathing again. You drift to sleep with a calm heart, dreaming of soil, sunlight, and the promise of green returning. The days have grown longer now. Each morning the light slips in earlier through the small window, and the air feels soft enough to breathe without pain. You wake to the sound of dripping water and the smell of damp earth. The fire, though smaller than before, still burns in the hearth. It is no longer a desperate flame, but a companion that lingers out of habit. You rise slowly, stretching the stiffness from your limbs, and look outside. The snow is gone from most of the fields, leaving behind streaks of brown and green. Tiny blades of grass push through the soil, and puddles catch the sky like small mirrors. You can hear birds again, real song this time, not the wind's lonely mimicry. It fills you with a quiet joy that almost feels like surprise. You step outside, boots sinking slightly into the soft mud. The air smells rich, alive with the scent of thawed soil and wet wood. In the distance, smoke curls gently from the cottages, rising straight upward without the wild bends of winter wind. The sky itself feels larger. According to notes left in an old farming calendar, this was the moment every medieval farmer waited for, the time to test the plough, to walk the field, to feel the promise of life returning beneath their feet. The earth, still cold, needed gentleness. You walk its edges carefully, dragging a stick along the furrows as if tracing old scars. The soil gives way, soft and forgiving. Your neighbour waves from across the lane, his oxen grazing on a patch of green. He calls out that it will be planting season soon, and you nod, smiling. The sound of his voice carries easily now that the air has softened. There is laughter again in the world, light and unforced. You return home to find your spouse kneeling by the hearth, cleaning the ashes. The children are outside, chasing each other through puddles, their boots splashing, their laughter spilling through the door. The cat, lazy as ever, dozes near the window, content in the warmth of the Sunday. You sit down at the table and watch the fire for a moment. The logs have burned low, but the embers glow steady and bright. You realize how much of your life has revolved around this small patch of flame. It was your sun during endless darkness, your company through hunger and fear. You will not need it as fiercely now, but it has become part of you. A curious entry in a household notebook written centuries ago describes the farewell to the winter fire, a small ritual practiced in certain villages. Families would let the hearth burn low one final time, whispering words of thanks before sweeping out the ashes and scattering them in the fields as a blessing for the crops. You decide to do the same. You take a handful of grey ash and step outside. The air is cool but kind. You scatter the ashes across the soil, watching them drift and settle among the damp furrows. The smoke of the past months joins the earth again, feeding what will soon grow. It feels like a circle closing. Scholars often debate whether medieval farmers understood cycles of renewal as science or faith. You think the two were never truly separate. The world turns, things die and are reborn, and you live inside that rhythm, whether or not you name it. You return to the house, wiping your hands on your cloak. Your spouse is humming again, a tune that sounds brighter now, faster, like running water. You join softly on the last few notes. It feels good to sing without the heaviness of breath that winter brought. As evening falls, the last of the sunlight paints the sky pink and gold. The children are still playing, their clothes soaked and muddy, but you cannot bring yourself to scold them. You remember your own childhood winters, the same games, the same laughter when the thaw finally came. Generations change,